Member for Wisham in Monmouth and member of this committee.
Okay. County Councillor Thomas Davis is running late, but he will be with us later on throughout the meeting. Councillor Lucas.
Morning all, my name is Jane Lucas, County Councillor for Osbaston Ward in Monmouth.
Next would be Councillor Maria Stevens, who's had to send her apologies this morning. Unfortunately, a personal issue has come up and it was impossible for her to attend. So Councillor Crook has kindly offered to substitute. Councillor Crook, would you just like to introduce yourself?
Councillor Crook, Mega East and Andy in placement of Maria Stevens.
Lovely. Councillor Thomas.
Good morning, Borida. I'm Tudor Thomas and I'm board member for Park in Abergavenny and obviously a member of this committee.
Okay. Councillor Wright.
Good morning, Councillor Laura Wright. I'm a member for Growfield Ward in Abergavenny.
Lovely. Just to let you know, Councillor Wright, your screen is frozen, so you might want to turn your camera off and turn it back on again, but we can hear you fine.
Okay, thank you, I'll do that.
Okay, and obviously I'm Councillor Lisa Dimmock for Port Stewart Ward, and I'm the chair of this select committee. Hazel and Rob, would you like to introduce yourself, and then Mark and Craig, the officers?
Hazel Eilert, Scrutiny Manager.
Robert McGowan, Scrutiny and Policy Officer.
Morning all, I'm Mark Hand, I'm Head of Service for Placemaking, Regeneration Highways and Flooding.
Good morning all, I'm Craig O'Connor, Head of Planning.
Thank you.
Lisa,
yes.
You missed me out.
Oh, I am ever so sorry, Councillor Strong. There's always someone that I miss out. It's my special person. Go on.
So I'm County Councillor Jackie Strong and I represent Caldicott Cross in Caldicott and I'm a member of this committee. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. The Cabinet member for this portfolio is Councillor Griffiths. He unfortunately is unable to attend today, but he did send his apologies. Can I just welcome all the members of the public that are sat in the back of the gallery? It's lovely to have people here willing to engage with us. We're very grateful. Thank you. So first, in the public forum, is there any declarations of interest? Councillor Bryn? Sorry.
Sorry. Me, I have a personal but non-prejudicial interest.
Okay.
Sorry. And I've already completed the form.
Lovely. Thank you ever so much. So public forum, the first speaker we have is Rob Olton. So if you'd like to come down, that'd be lovely. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Rob Olton. I'm a resident of Mega and have been there for the last 16 years. I recently retired from the television industry as an editor of factual programmes, and it was my job to make sure that any issues discussed in the programmes that I made were accurately researched and communicated. I also have a degree in town and country planning. I've read the replacement local development plan for Monmouthshire, and I see that the areas identified for new housing development within the county are weighted heavily towards Sevenside. I think this is a fundamentally flawed policy. Throughout the document, there is a clear message about retaining the identity of Monmouthshire as a county of green open space, and yet Sevenside is seen somehow as separate from the rest of the county, perhaps because it's slightly more urbanised than the rest of the county. But Sevenside does have rural qualities about it. It's part of the Gwent Levels. adding more houses into the area will erode the incredible unique quality of this part of Monmouthshire. No longer will it be seen as rural, but part of an urban corridor between Newport and Chepstow. The rural nature of my village of Mega, although for reasons I don't understand, it's now called a town, is under threat with overdevelopment. It's very short of green space for recreational purposes. I'm a runner, and the areas that I can run off-road are gradually being taken away by building more and more houses. I don't wish there to be any more development around my village. And I can imagine the people living in the east of Caldicot feel the same way. I didn't move into Mega to live in a town. I moved there to live in a quiet, semi-rural village. I dislike what is happening to it. Please stop any more overdevelopment taking place in Sevenside and ask the planners to be more creative with their solutions to fulfil housing quotas. I note that the earlier version of the local development plan had to be revised because no houses were planned around Monmouth itself. The replacement plan addresses this by taking some of the totals away from Sevenside and allocating them to Monmouth and other areas. But this policy shift has not gone far enough. I think that a more even spread of housing towards Monmouth and Abergavenny would ensure that Sevenside retains that unique rural quality as the gateway to the magnificent Gwent Levels. It seems to me that the replacement local development plan is unsound. It doesn't fit, it's not appropriate, and will not deliver. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Rob. Next is Keith Portney. That's it, when the light comes on, it's on. Sorry.
Sorry. Shall I start again?
Yes.
Oh, I'll just leave it on there. Sorry. Good morning. I'm Keith Portney and a resident of Mega. Monmouthshire has a population of approximately 92,000. Sevenside has a population of approximately 20,000. Is it right to cram 21% of the population into a small area, about 6% of the county? Is that sustainable? In the preferred strategy document, it states 1 in 3 of all new homes will be built in Sevenside. Is that sustainable? More housing development means more concrete and tarmac over our farmland and the Gwent Levels. Let's look at the map of the new town of Mega and Undie, which lies within the Gwent Levels and is sandwiched between the M4 motorway and the mainline railway. I have in my hand a booklet which was to encourage people to move to Mega and Undie some years ago. I quote from it. The development is not a new town, nor even the building of a big new estate. Reality check. It is now a town. We now have 4 big estates, Kensington, Manor Chase, Rockfield Farm and Vinegar Hill. The forecast was for the village to grow to 5,000 people. It's well over 6,000. It'll probably get to 10,000 before we know it. It states there will be 40 acres of public open space, excluding playing fields. Reality check. We have a deficit of open space. We've been robbed of the land. It also states about 20 acres of adjoining land, adjoining the M4 motorway, will be grazed. Reality check. You're now looking at building on this land or developing it. This is clear evidence that Mega and Undie has been overdeveloped for years. Look at the map and you'll see the last few remaining pieces of green open space. Due to the topography, the surface water runs off the M4 and all the homes in the town feed into the Reens, which in turn feed into the Triple SI. This untreated polluted water is allowed to flow into the Triple SI. We're on the edge of a floodplain. In December 2020, the runoff water couldn't flow away fast enough, resulting in the flooding of homes in Mega. some homes, a sign of existing overdevelopment already. We've been encouraged to be eco-friendly, but the doctor's surgery is already overscribed and there's a frequent request for patients to travel to Caldicott. Is that eco-friendly? If dog walkers want to take their dogs for a decent walk, they're forced to travel further afield. Is this eco-friendly? There's little or no mention of jobs within Sevenside to support the existing housing. There's more and more people are travelling further afield, back to Bristol and places. Again, is this eco-friendly? So how does this all fit in with your objective to maximise the potential of the natural environment when you build all over it? This is getting beyond insane. On the subject of protection, on Radio 4's programme, Life Scientific, they interviewed the Director of Science at Kew Gardens about his response to climate change. He said, first thing is to protect first. He said protect first, not develop first. Let this be a climate change and environmentally led RLDP, not housing development led. It's easy to blame others, we are where we are. But if we're going to get the same old approach, then you know better than any previous administration. So please stop the development of the remaining green spaces around Mega and Sevenside now. Thank you. So I'll press this off.
I would leave it on just so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Brenda Lloyd.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to address this committee. My name is Brenda Lloyd and I live in Langley Close, Mega. I worked as clerk of the council for Mega Vivendi Community Council for 22 years, so I know first-hand knowledge about the overdevelopment of our village and lack of amenity provision. In fact, my husband and I built our house in Langley Close under the Gwent County Council Village Expansion Scheme in 1976. And even then, the amount of amenity provision was woeful. The area between Langley Close and the M4 was designated grazing land at that time. The village is still having large housing developments built without the much-needed large usable open space. This shortage was outlined explicitly in a report dated December 2008. Deficiency of 5.83 acres, 14.4 acres of outdoor provision when the standard of 1.6 hectares per 1,000 population is applied. The deficiency is even more now with the amount of new houses built since 2008. The Community Council, as then, consistently tried to protect existing spaces and worked closely with Monmouthshire County Council officers from leisure to utilise what we had. The officers were well aware of the shortcomings in the village of amenity space. It is very sad that the cricket and rugby club had to leave the village and cannot find a location within the immediate town. Everyone is thankful that the hub buildings has come to the Victory Field site, but the buildings and the car park fill 2/3 of the area, so it's not added to the green open space. These amenity spaces are so important to our community, as there is no other land available in our area that can be used, as we are constricted by the M4, the railway and the Eastern Access Road. I urge this committee most strongly to retain all areas designated for amenity open space in the new replacement local development plan to ensure everyone now and for future generations will benefit from their provision. Thank you.
Next is Mr. Charles Webster. Sorry, Charles Webster.
Good morning. My name is Charles Webster and I reside in Roggett. I'd like to speak about the protection of our declining community, one that to me is becoming a small ethnic community in Sevenside. I mean, of course, the young farmer who resides at the top end in the field off Langley Close. As a background, I'd like to refer to a council publication from some years ago regarding Mega, which stated, an area of open land near the M4 will ensure that development will never take place near or close to a motorway. Yet, Monmouthshire County Council is looking to renege on this. I ask a simple question, why? When only 3 words matter: trust, support, and commitment. That's what we look to for our council. You're advised not to build on land next to bad neighbours, such as motorways. Yet, Monmouthshire County Council plan to do exactly that. It's obvious that development is put before any form of health in the community. And whilst on that subject, the question obviously feeds to, if we're going to include and increase our community, then are we increasing our services? Are we increasing our surgeries? Are we increasing our police force? Are we increasing our fire service? Are we increasing our road structures? These are important things which I would have thought would have come primarily as part of the development and planning for a community. In getting from Sevenside today, I drove past a few housing developments where farmland used to be. Ironically, part of Mega is today called the Rockfield Farm Development. It replaces old farmland. What could be a more significant abuse of farmland than to turn it over to development, or turn it over to some site or some other impractical use that does not benefit the community? Remember, we have a finite amount of farmland. Once it's been built upon, that's it gone forever. People are concerned over climate change and the frailty of the food supply. Remember, our food does not come from supermarkets. It comes from farmers. Yet, Monmouthshire County Council again decided to put development before farmland. And interestingly, I was watching a programme last night which said that the UK has one of the worst conversion from farmland to development in the whole of Europe. Worrying. Unfortunately, it's been publicised of late that Monmouthshire County Council has identified farmland on the Gwent levels next to Langley Close that is currently farmed by a young farmer and his family. They are young parents and they're looking to continue farming. But how are they going to do this if their land is now turned over to development? And they use development in its broadest context. Instead of praising the efforts that the young family have made to improve the site and improve the ecology of the site, they'll be turfed off that land. They'll be evicted with an uncertain future. Where is the trust that they put in Monmouthshire County Council? Where's the trust that we put in Monmouthshire County Council? It comes to 3 words: trust, belief, and support. To conclude, the good news is that the site on which the young family have resided and farmed has only been submitted as a proposal. But this is not only a proposal. This should be a situation where Monmouthshire County Council say we will look after and we will protect our community. I hope that's what you can do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Next is Eileen Wallen.
Morning. Extracts of the policies that I refer to, I've popped out copies for you. Hello, my name is Eileen Eileen Wallen. I'm a resident of Mega and Undy, and I work for over 25 years in social housing. I now volunteer with the RSPB and have undertaken to be an ambassador for the Living Levels project, to which MCC generously with us provided funding. I believe this gives me a balanced approach to the replacement local development plan. I'm sure that you will have listened to John Griffiths MS's video on Twitter recently, when he talks about providing supplementary planning guidance for the Gwent levels, which, as you can see from the map provided, Mega and Undy is within the curtilage. Our landscape is at risk of being degraded, undervalued and further developed in spite of the vast wealth of natural, semi-natural and man-made treasures that this unique landscape holds. Pressure from new urban developments will erode the character of the landscape, wildlife populations and cultural heritage, further fragmenting habitats and severing public access. Mega and Undy will have no green spaces left, sandwiched between the M4 and the railway. Sporting facilities, allotments, natural outdoor space are vital to the health and well-being of the community. Objective 3 of the LDP is clearly not being met in relation to green infrastructure, biodiversity and landscape, and neither is Objective 8 regarding health and well-being. The amount and quality of our open space amenity land is being constantly eroded and will be further eroded by the replacement LDP. Identified, protected and other species will be destroyed on one of the main arteries into the Gwent levels. Millreen and the wildlife it supports will be negatively affected. For the sake of the population's health and well-being on our natural surroundings, it has to stop. Mega and Undy have only a few DES 2 open space areas left, and I would ask this scrutiny committee to recommend that DES 2 is not removed from them. MCC's own green strategy has clearly been ignored, particularly when you look at the GI opportunities relating to Mega and Undy. I would also like to draw your attention to Policy S13, Landscape, Green Structure and the Natural Environment, in particular to number 2, maintain, protect and enhance the integrity and connectivity of Monmouthshire's green infrastructure network. I'm at a loss to see how the RLDP does any of this. The level of growth proposed has the potential to negatively impact on environmental assets and have adverse consequences for climate and nature emergencies. I therefore cannot agree with MCC's test of soundness in relation to Future Wales Policy 9 regarding resilient ecological networks and green infrastructure, and I quote, "Biodiversity enhancements must be considered in all developments, and the enhancement should be proportionate in size and scale to the development. Therefore, I conclude the RLDP is not a reasonable and proportionate response to the needs of the population or the natural environment. It is not balanced and most certainly does not pass the test for soundness." Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you. And next is Sandy Lloyd. Okay, just to let members and the public know, this is a map provided by the Undy residents. They've highlighted areas and given out to you today in handouts and to officers.
Hello, please take a look at your map of Mega and Undy. You'll see that the M48 joins the M4 to the east of Undy. Junction 23A of the M4 is to the west of Mega. The A4810 Steelworks Road provides access to the M4 via Junction 23A. The B4245 is the only main road through and the only route out of Sevenside to the M4. It joins the Steelworks Road just before junction 23A. It's well known that there are regular 9-mile tailbacks well beyond junction 23A and often back to Bristol as there were this morning. This is now. Yet a major reason cited in the preferred strategy to justify another huge development programme in Sevenside is the accessibility to the M4. The huge strategic developments under construction in Undy at Rockfield Farm and Vinegar Hill in the previous LDP were predicated on the M4 Relief Road and Mega-Undy bypass going ahead. Both were scrapped. Yet the developments were allowed to proceed and indeed expand to encompass the land safeguarded for that purpose. Additionally, 4,000 homes are under construction at Glanlyn on the Steelworks Road. Newport's RLDP is proposing thousands more homes and more employment expansion in this area, which is only a mile from Mega. So there will be tens of thousands of extra cars, vans and lorries in Sevenside and Newport East, all requiring access to and egress from the M4 at junction 23A. Yet there's no evidence that Monmouthshire and Newport councils have worked collaboratively to assess the impact of their combined growth plans on the wider area and the M4. The integrated sustainability appraisal tries to mislead by stating there is no evidence to conclude that the higher levels of growth will impact the road network. There's no evidence to conclude anything because there's no evidence, period. The justification provided is more active travel, predicated on the delivery of the South East Wales Metro and a token walkway station at Mega. It's negligent to build thousands more homes in Sevenside without the necessary infrastructure being in place first. Mega with Undy already sees large tailbacks along the B4245, often back to Chepstow when the Severn Bridge is closed, as it is frequently, and this weekend. This ill-considered spatial distribution strategy will result in the whole of Sevenside being gridlocked and further and more frequent traffic jams on the M4. The M4 Relief Road was supposed to reduce nitrogen oxides by 15%. Instead, the tolls were removed and M4 traffic increased by 16% just in the first year. Mega and Undy are choking to death. Where are the traffic, air and noise pollution assessments? We were sold a pup in the LDP and we are about to be sold a pup with the RLDP. The spatial distribution is flawed. It does not reflect sustainable objectives and Monmouthshire County Council has not demonstrated that the plan is based on robust evidence. The RLDP preferred strategy fails the tests of soundness. It does not fit, is not appropriate and will not deliver. You could single-handedly crash the whole Welsh economy. We are at the gateway to Wales and are sending a clear message. The gate is shut. Wales is closed for business. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Next is Graham Caulfield. Sorry?
It's not here.
Oh, right, okay, that's fine. We've next got a video from Mr. Colin Archer and Richard Anthony.
Hi, my name is Colin Archer. I'm a resident of Sudbrook. Thank you for the opportunity to make this submission. My main concerns are firstly around infrastructure and then secondarily about the environment. On infrastructure, I don't think that there is sufficient provision for public transport, general practitioners, dentists, healthcare, shopping or leisure in the area. Now, I understand that building this development would mean that those additional facilities would be put in place, but I also believe that the plan refers to Caldecott as an existing town with facilities in place. There is precious little already in place in Caldecott. When it comes to infrastructure and travel, if you look at the additional load on the road network, people in these dwellings will travel either to Bristol or to Newport for work, leisure or shopping. And the road network just cannot support the additional numbers of cars that we would see from a development of this size. There's no public transport. The nearest train stations are in Chepstow or at Severn Tunnel Junction, which again means people would have to travel in their cars to get there. So overall, I think that that is not taken into account. When it comes to climate, I've got significant concerns about flooding. We already see flooding in the area. The runoff from this development would make that worse. I just can't see how we could account for the amount of water that would come from surface runoff and allow it to be taken. And that's putting aside my worries about air pollution from the volume of additional traffic, the impact on biodiversity, and the overall impact of all of the emissions from these additional dwellings in the area. Finally, on social housing, I think that the addition of quite such a number of social housing, which I fully support in Monmouth, seems to me to be concentrated in one place. Now, I think social housing should be built in the communities where it is needed for people in those communities who want to remain where they were growing up. It feels to me like you've put it all in one place, and that doesn't seem quite to fit the need. Finally, on access to all of the documentation, a 400-page document to review in the amount of time that it's being given before this meeting just feels a bit anti-democratic. I think that we ought to have had these documents sooner and had more chance to scrutinise them. Thank you very much for your time.
I'd just like to give apologies. For some reason, we couldn't get Colin on the screen. We could see it on Hazel's computer, but we couldn't get that on the screen, but it was a video, okay? So apologies, Mr. Archer. Next, we've got David Cummins. Whilst David is making his way down, is there any other members of the public who wish to contribute this morning? No? Okay, thank you. That's all you ready.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and council members and officers. I'm here to speak this morning in opposition to Monmouth being allocated a huge increase of 230% more housing in the September version of the preferred strategy of this RLDP. Please see the image on the screen. Other towns have stayed the same or have increases in single digits. Nowhere in the 168-page document does it explain the build-up to an increase of 634 houses in the various columns. It only explains where 270 will be on one candidate's site and refers to those sites now freed by the lifting of the phosphate ban. I've been a resident of Monmouth for 22 years and have been closely monitoring development of the LDP and RLDP in a previous community role. I'm aware that public discussion on individual candidate sites should wait until the deposit plan of spring 24. I'm speaking on behalf of residents, but my speech has been approved by Monmouth Chamber of Commerce. MCC has signed up to both the Health and Wellbeing Act and the Climate Emergency. Surely it should be a serious consideration in allocating houses to towns in the county for either of two principles to be followed. One, build houses near to jobs, or two, provide excellent public transport to travel from house to job. At the present time, there are no possibilities of major new employers moving to Monmouth. So this means more out-migration to work for the owners of new houses and more pollution on the A40. Public transport is a bit of a joke. 2 hours on a bus to get to Newport. The Cardiff Capital City Region deal did not give Monmouth a metro or a new rail link. What about the potential effect on Monmouth's infrastructure? Sewage treatment current capacity at 100%. What will Welsh Water, who are struggling to fix the phosphate issue on the Wye by 2026, think of more sewage to treat? Schools, state schools running at nearly 100% capacity. Doctors' surgeries both need to move to larger premises to cope with existing demand. In conclusion, I believe this September 2023 revised document is deeply flawed. From the crossings out and amendments to the original, it looks like it was prepared in a bit of a rush. Those who created it in Monmouth's case did not consider how our infrastructure would cope, or even if the consequences included a considerable increase in our CO2 footprint. Forget net zero in 2050. I plead with the committee to reject this September 2023 document in its current form. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cummins. I would like, sorry. Okay. I would like to thank all the members of the public for your contributions this morning and taking the time and effort to engage. You can help us improve the quality and effectiveness of services that we provide, and you can significantly influence the decisions we take. Engaging with our communities and residents is vital for the council in planning and structuring of our services that meets your needs. So thank you ever so much. You are welcome to stay for the entire meeting. It's going to be probably a bit of a lengthy one. I'm going to allow members to take a short 5-minute break just to grab a drink and maybe use the facilities, and then we'll start again and go to agenda item number 4. Thank you. Okay, thank you, members. We'll now continue. So we're going to go to item 4, the replacement local development plan, the RLDP strategy. The purpose of this report is to facilitate pre-decision scrutiny on post-consultation amendments to the RLDP. Like I said earlier in the introductions, the Cabinet member is not here, so the two gentlemen sat in front of me are officers. They are not responsible for bringing these proposals forward. But I would just like to thank Mark and Craig for attending to answer questions and introduce and present the report today. Thank you. So I'm going to hand you over to Mark Hand.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, everyone. You partly covered what I was going to say to start with anyway, Chair, but just wanted to thank the members of the public for their engagement this morning. It's been really helpful and we look forward to continuing to work with you. We've certainly listened to what you're saying and your ward members have also passed those comments on previously. So we'll continue to engage with you in that way. We know that Councillor Griffiths, who's a Cabinet member with responsibility for the plan, although we can't be here today, we know he will be listening in to the recording of the meeting and will also be taking on board that feedback and that's going to help us with continuing to develop the replacement plan. I'll pass to Craig in a second to run through some slides just to summarise the changes and help sort of shape the further member discussion on this. I thought it'd just be helpful though to clarify the stage that we're at with the plan. So this report is based on consultation responses to the preferred strategy. We consulted on that for 8 weeks in December and January, so December last year, January this year, and this looks at the key changes that we're suggesting are made to the strategy based on that. And some of those really significant changes come from the Welsh Government's response, which Craig will touch on in a few minutes. So this isn't currently a consultation document. We're just seeking council endorsement. This is still the direction of travel, highlighting what those changes are. And then all of this becomes subject to public consultation in what we call the deposit plan, which will be in sort of later part of spring next year, which is when all of the policies, all of the sites will be in there, and the strategy will be back before you as well, that all of that is based on. So that's sort of the status of where we are. Apologies if people were concerned they didn't have enough time to look at it. We deliberately left it in the format with highlighted new text and strike through old text to make it clear what the changes were, and it wasn't the intention that everyone had just a few days to read a massive great document and comment on it in quite that way, although we're grateful for that input. So Chair, if you're happy, I'll pass over to Craig. We'll run through a few slides and then allow plenty of time for member questions and discussion.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I will just pull up the slides, so if you bear with me with technology. Is that shown for everyone in the room and at home as well, virtually? Yeah, brilliant. Okay, great. Yes, as Mark said, we're here today to talk about the update to the development in relation to the replacement local development plan for 2018-2033, and we are reviewing these changes with members in light of the public consultation that happened last December and January. So on the comments that we have received from Welsh Government, from members of the public, from statutory consultees, these changes are influenced and shaped around those changes, and then there will be a full public consultation and engagement exercise as part of the deposit plan. So this is all part of policy formulation as we work up to the deposit plan. There is still going to be a significant amount of time for engagement and consultation as we move through the stages. So at the moment, if you look at the orange square, that was the square that we were on previously in terms of the stages of the plan, the preferred strategy. December 2022, January 2023, we sent the consultation. We're now in between 3 and 4, so 4 will be next spring, early summer, in terms of looking at the deposit plan and going out to full engagement on the detailed planning policies, the local planning policy framework, and the detailed candidate sites. So at that stage, the candidate site assessment will outline which sites are being proposed within the replacement local development plan for development. And then after that, following that consultation and engagement, if there are any amendments or changes as part of that consultation, it'll then be put forward to a full formal examination by a planning inspector appointed by the Welsh Government. So it'll be independently reviewed in terms of the test of soundness and reviewing whether the development is meeting all the credentials in terms of environmental sustainability and the impact in terms of infrastructure. This is just a slide to show members the preferred strategy we consulted on. So as Mark has already alluded to, we want to show you the changes quite easily. So there is this slide which shows what the preferred strategy was before the proposed changes we're discussing today. So the previous strategy consulted on was to grow Monmouthshire by 5,400 to 5,940 homes, including approximately 1,580 to 1,850 affordable homes. These was also enabling the provision of 6,240 jobs, and a focused growth on exemplar, well-connected in our most sustainable settlements of Abergavenny, Caldecott, including Sevenside, and Chepstow. And it identified 3 strategic development site allocations, and that was mainly based on the fact that we have an environmental issue within the north of the county relating to water quality in our rivers. The development proposal was also, the development in the replacement local development plan was also going to have a limited impact on climate change by ensuring new homes were net zero carbon ready and well connected with existing homes. So there really is a focus on being able to walk, cycle, ensuring that we adhere to the transport hierarchy outlined in Planning Policy Wales by ensuring these settlements and these extensions of settlements are well connected and people have a less carbon footprint. This slide just shows the updated version of the preferred strategy based on the changes that I will run through with you point by point in a moment, but this just shows what the changes, the impact it will have in terms of growing Monmouthshire. So it will now grow Monmouthshire up to 6,210 homes. This will allow for additional flexibility in the plan, with 1,910 affordable homes being developed. The amount of jobs will stay the same, so still enabling the provision of 6,240 jobs. We will now be proposing 4 strategic development site allocations. This is based on the fact that Welsh Government have come back and outlined that there is a strategic phosphate solution for Abergavenny and Llanfoist and also Monmouth by the 30th of March 2025. There will be a strategic solution in place, and then therefore after that period we will be able to allow development in those locations, so over the development plan period. And then the 4th change on the bottom is in relation to the development, the new homes being net zero carbon ready, and then there's now a shift to be net zero carbon, which I will go into in a bit more detail in a moment, but we're exploring ways to ensure that the new homes we construct in Monmouthshire do not increase carbon emissions in the long term. So these are the proposed changes that the council is proposing in relation to the development of the deposit plan. So this is following on from the consultation. The council is seeking to listen to the views and the comments that have been made. So there is a view to add a strategic site within Monmouth, and this is based on the fact of the change within for the Welsh Government in relation to the phosphate stripping capability. And this is to look to allocate candidate site CS0270, which is Leesbrook off Dixon Road. And this would be for approximately 270 homes. And then we'll also factor in legacy sites, which I'll come on to in a moment. Second change is to amend the site allocation within Chepstow by allocating candidate site CS0165, Mountain Road, for approximately 145 homes and commercial developments, which could be the potential for a hotel and a possible care home. The third change is an increase in the flexibility allowance from 10% to 15%. So that increases the amount of housing provision by 270 homes. Making allowance within the plan for the fourth change is to make allowance within the plan for 100 Ministry of Defence homes to provide service family accommodation. And that would be specifically for the Ministry of Defence only and ring fence for them. They're not part of our housing requirement or need, so it wouldn't affect the amount of people on our waiting list who are urgently waiting for homes. The fifth point is to amend the policy requirement from net zero carbon ready to net zero carbon. So where do these changes come from? So as I've already mentioned, this is the slide just to show in terms of that allocation of a strategic site in Monmouth now, the Welsh Government's Planning Division's response has outlined that on the basis that an improvement to both works to remove phosphates are planned is appropriate to identify new affordable housing-led allocations in both Monmouth and Abergavenny in the deposit plan. So Welsh Government has certainly given us the direction that we need to allocate in Monmouth moving forward in terms of the deposit plan. And obviously that is really, really positive in ensuring that we do sustain the community of Monmouth, provide affordable housing in Monmouth, and it isn't a settlement which is left behind out of this plan in the short to medium to long term. This slide just shows the legacy sites in Monmouth. So these were identified within the previous preferred strategy as bonus sites. And Welsh Government have indicated they need to form part of our allocation. So these sites will be rolled over from the existing plan into the replacement local development plan. So these are the legacy sites. So these are Druin Farm, which still has land allocated for approximately 110 homes. And we're currently engaged with pre-application discussions with the landowner at the present time. There's also Tudor Road in Wisham, that is for approximately 35 to 50 homes. Again, we're in early discussions with the developer to come forward with a site, legacy sites which would be allocated within Monmouth. Again, some already gaining planning consent and some already having existing allocations. Then the new site in Monmouth, which has been identified, is land at Dixon Road, which is 270, which is to the east of your screen, just off the Dixon roundabout there. And the other two sites that were in consideration as a potential preferred option were land at Vauxhall Fields in the middle of the site and land at Wanstow Road. Now, there are rationale and reasons as to why those sites haven't potentially come forward, which has resulted in those sites being less sustainable in terms of their distance to the town centre, the impact on landscape, potential flooding considerations, and also the high level of best and most versatile agricultural land of those sites. So, as we know, in Planning Policy Wales, it outlines that we need to ensure that we keep our agricultural lands, and if there are two sites which have the same sustainability credentials and one has a high agricultural land classification, you should go for the one which has the low one. So that's where some of those decisions are making, and Dixon Road is coming out of those assessments as being the most preferable in terms of sustainability and best and most versatile agricultural land. The amendment of the strategic site in Chepstow. So this is the second alteration that is being proposed as we formulated the development of the deposit plan. We're not proposing to increase the number of homes allocated within Monmouth. That would remain at 145. However, the Mountain Road candidate site has also offered up potential commercial developments. So you can see there in the table the pros and cons in terms of what sites should be allocated. It is right to notify and outline here that in terms of best and most versatile agricultural land, Bayfield does have less. However, and the planning balance to be made here is the potential use of commercial uses on this site with good transport access and infrastructure access, and the potential for enhancing tourism and to support our demographic in terms of the potential development of a care home as well. So in terms of the balance there, that is what is being proposed as a potential amendment in terms of the candidate site moving forward. In terms of increasing the flexibility allowance, this is the third potential amendment to in terms of the development of the replacement local development plan, to increase the allowance from 10% to 15%. There are significant benefits to doing this. It ensures the large strategic sites are sufficiently large to deliver the required infrastructure. So namely in the proposed Caldecott East, there's a certain level which is needed to provide a primary school. And also these sites are going to take a long time to come on to development. The large sites, they're going to need a bit of lead-in time. So this will allow for a bit of flexibility within the plan to allow other sites to come forward and allow us to address the affordable housing need, which is in Monmouthshire, which is significantly high. So it will allow that it's more robust, it's more resilient, and it does allow for other sites to come forward over the plan period. This just shows the slide to show that the distribution in terms of relation to the flexibility allowance. So in the slide, in the preferred strategy column here, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor. You can actually. The replacement local development new housing allocations, the dwellings bracket. This shows the provision that we'll make in each settlement area in terms of housing. So in Abergavenny, including Lanfoys, it'd be 600 homes. In Chepstow, it'd be 145. In Monmouth, including Wisham, it'd be 330. That's not including the Legacy and the Tudor Road, Druin Farm, and the bit which already gained planning consent on Rockfield Road, and that's where the 330 comes from, the 270 from Monmouth Road and the Dixon Road site, and the additional 60 from the remainder of the Rockfield Road site. Caldecott, including Sevenside, would be 825. Secondary settlements would be 120, and rural settlements to provide some small affordable housing-led developments in our rural communities would be 105. So that would make provision for 2,125 homes over the plan period. This just shows what the increased flexibility allowance would mean for the big strategic sites that we've been discussing. So Abergavenny East, a number of homes allocated there would be 500. Mountain Road, Chepstow would be 145. Leesbrook would be 270, and Caldecott East would be 735. That doesn't include the potential for the 100 MOT homes for service family accommodation to support the barracks. And these are just those final amendments, really. So number 4, which is just to make allowance for those 100 homes for the Ministry of Defence. They want homes to provide service family accommodation within the south of the county, in close proximity to the barracks, but also close proximity to communities, to allow the family to integrate into schools and to be part of the community. And they have identified Caldecott East as being their preferred option. They will be ring-fenced for people working within the Ministry of Defence, not available for the general public, and therefore they're not part of that housing requirement figure. So it won't affect the amount of people who are on our waiting list urgently requiring housing need. And that last change is to move from net zero carbon ready to net zero carbon. So new homes would now achieve a balance between the carbon emitted into the atmosphere and the I can't read that element, and the carbon removed from it. So really looking to find that balance and ensuring that we don't have an impact in terms of increasing those environmental credentials. It must be said that officers are currently still investigating this. We would be the first in Wales to sort of have this sort of policy, so we're still working out the exact wording within that policy, but certainly the aspiration and move towards ensuring that these big strategic sites don't have the least carbon footprint impact that they potentially could have. So looking at the viability implications and delivery mechanisms for that at the moment, and the full details of that will be outlined within the deposit plan, which will then, as I've already stated, go up for full public consultation and engagement. So as members would already be aware, this is the vision for our strategic sites. They are going to be exemplar, well-connected, affordable housing-led developments that enhance towns and provide highly sustainable homes for future generations. They're going to be 50-50 affordable housing-led across all the sites, so really, really striving to provide those affordable housing and meeting the housing need that we have in Monmouthshire. that word in this is net zero ready homes, but as I just already explained, that should have been changed. It's net zero carbon now, so they will be highly efficient, and that policy development is going on at the moment to see how that policy word is going to be. They have excellent active travel connections to encourage movement away from the private motor vehicle. So again, focusing in on pedestrian links, cycling links. It is going to be a challenge in a rural authority, but certainly we've been really successful in achieving a high level of active travel funding in the past, and I know the Cabinet member is certainly encouraging and pushing for additional provision as part of the plan moving forward. We're going to seek to have a housing mix. So historically, sometimes we have focused on more bigger, larger detached properties, really looking for a mix of properties here for terrace properties, semi-detached, bungalows, looking to ensure that we do provide for all of our demographic. We want to ensure we have access to green open space, integration of green infrastructure within the development, so ensuring that we do have the open space within the developments. We might allocate potential more land to ensure we have lower density development proposals and ensure that we have green and blue environment throughout our proposals. So there really will be a high standard of built environment. And it's worth members outlining that this is a site allocation plan. It allocates land for development. It's not the only plan that the council is working on, and it needs to be seen integrated with these other documents, which will run alongside the replacement local development plan. So with this significant work ongoing in terms of the infrastructure plan, there's going to be an updated local transport plan, an economic development strategy, which will certainly focus on that jobs element and the commercial element and where we allocate land for development. It's also going to be subject to an integrated sustainability appraisal, which is done externally by external consultants, habitat regulations assessment to ensure that we don't have an adverse impact on habitats and ecology within the county. There's also, as members are aware, a Gypsy and Traveller site search to ensure that we provide homes for the community of Gypsy and Travellers. Renewable energy study, looking at where we can have renewable energy across the county, and a green wedge review to look at where land needs to have that additional level of protection and be allocated within the plan for a green wedge to ensure that there isn't exposed to overdevelopment in the future. So there are a number of different studies and plans alongside the replacement local development plan, which will ensure that we do provide the right communities for our future generations. And that is the end of the presentation, Chair. If I'm more than happy to take any questions and discussions and comments on the proposed changes as we develop the deposit plan.
Thank you for that, Craig. Obviously, you noted that it was a lengthy report. Just before the meeting, we had a discussion. I've been contacted by a number of residents with dyslexia saying that they're struggling to absorb all the information. Will there be easy-to-read documents going forward?
Yes, thank you, Chair, for answering that question. As we said at the beginning of the presentation, this is an additional stage that we've come back in terms of looking at proposed policy formulation up until the deposit plan. There was an easy read guide with the preferred strategy, and we're certainly going to be doing an easy read guide for the deposit plan when we go out for public consultation on the proposed changes. So yes, certainly all of that will be looked at. I'm more than happy to engage with members in terms of any other ways that we can make the documents and information more accessible to the public, because we certainly want as much engagement as we can have.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, members, it's over to you now. So the hands up facility is available in the chat bar. Can anyone come forward with some questions for our officers? Thank you. Okay, Councillor Bryn.
Thank you, Chair. I have 4 questions, if that's okay, if I can just read them all out. Are we planning on allocating land for potential self-builds, and could we consider taking the opportunity of opening up part of MCC farmland and offering plots for rent for one planet development project, thereby enabling young enthusiastic Welsh residents from less affluent backgrounds the opportunity to try their hand at sustainable living without losing our scarce resources? It states in the LDP that we're focusing our growth on our more sustainable developments, including Monmouth. Can someone please explain to me how Monmouth qualifies as a sustainable development, considering the lack of public transport links? Welsh Government feedback states that we are to restrict the potential negative impact on increased proportional private car trips on local trunk roads. How then do we justify further housing in Monmouth, knowing the impact this will have on the A40 trunk road, which we have been informed is already at capacity, and knowing residents have no alternative but the private car? A5 .27 states that Monmouth benefits from a range of bus services to South Wales and cities and Gloucester and Herefordshire, but I challenge anyone to use those services and to access work in Newport, Hereford or Gloucester, as the services are neither frequent nor reliable and are often non-existent. Question 3. We are told that improvements to the wastewater treatment works at Monmouth and Abergavenny are planned for 2025, but do we know how robust the phosphate removal will be and what guarantees we have that the foul drainage networks will be able to cope with this additional capacity? And then finally, Mountain Road versus Bayfield. Are we claiming to be protecting and appreciating the value of our best and most versatile land, recognising our fertile soils as a capital asset and considering the economic benefits that the best and most versatile land provide? Only 10% of the land in Wales is recognised as BMV. We cannot make any more. Once it's lost forever. Why are we then sacrificing food creation for job creation? How did the Mountain Road site, encroaching on the Green Wedge and containing 72% best and most versatile land, get selected over Bayfield with 28% Grade 2 BMV land? What grading does the land at Mountain House have? Is this not also Grade 2 land? Only 6% of our land is classified as Grade 1 and 2 BMV land. Should we not therefore be developing around this incredibly short national resource? Diolch.
Thanks, Chair. So I was just checking with the Chair if she'd like us to come back member by member or wait. It's easier to do it member by member, so if you're happy with that. So yeah, thanks for those questions, Councillor Britton. I think Craig and I do a double act on answering those. So the first couple, in terms of allocating land for self-builds and one planet development, primarily what the LDP does is put land there for types of use, so for residential. You know, we can explore if other councils have successfully done that in terms of actually allocating sites for self-build, but some of that often comes down to more things like land ownership. So that is a reason why there's an advantage to us expanding eastwards of Caldecott onto MCC-owned land, because then as a landowner, we have greater control over how that land's brought forward, so that could certainly happen. One planet developments benefit from their own fairly generous policy, which means they don't have to be within LDP boundaries, which ironically inflates land values and so probably makes it less accessible to people who would want to do that kind of development. So there's quite generous national policy that we don't need to duplicate in the LDP that would allow one planet developments to come forwards, and I know we've approved a couple of those within Monmouthshire already. So I'm not sure whether allowing for that within an allocated residential site would actually be helpful. It might actually have a weird perverse impact of bumping up the land value by giving it kind of bricks and mortar value and making that less likely to happen, but we can explore that further. Your second question was around focusing the growth on the most sustainable locations. So yeah, I understand the points about Monmouth and the challenges that it faces in terms of public transport in particular. In a Monmouthshire context, Monmouth is one of our top 4 most sustainable locations, and there's a background paper on the website, which is a sustainable settlements appraisal, which looks at how our settlements score. And it's really trying to get that balance between our need for affordable housing, our need for some growth, our need for some jobs growth, and those aspects like infrastructure and the environmental quality. So it's trying to get that balance right and allowing for a suitable level of growth to sustain towns without having significant adverse environmental impacts or causing excessive travel. So that's what we're trying to do in this strategy. If we don't have any affordable housing in Monmouth, which was a previous proposition because of phosphates and solely because of phosphates that we've now overcome. The real difficulty then was there won't be any affordable homes. The housing supply in itself will be constrained, so prices will inevitably go up, and even more local people will be squeezed out of the market and need to move away. So it's trying to sustain communities in a social and economic sense as well as environmentally and get that balance right. So we think and our proposition to you is that the level of growth that's now proposed for Monmouth is appropriate. I know one of the speakers earlier, David, mentioned about the level of change. Within the document, there were bonus sites that were referred to that weren't within the numbers. So paragraph 4.8 of the previous strategy had those bonus sites within it. They're now included within the housing figures. So the level of growth is the same, except for the 270 home sites that's now proposed, but the figures are shown in a different way. So that's the balance. In terms of travel as well, and that infrastructure piece is widespread across the county, but national policy is the first step is to reduce the need to travel. So have homes where people need them, have jobs where those homes are, or the ability for people to work from home or work from local hubs without getting on the bus or the train or the car is the first step. So it's trying to get that part of the balance as well as right. But yeah, it's a difficult balance to strike. I think your next two questions were about phosphate removal and sewage capacity, and then BMV. So Craig, you happy picking up on those two?
Yep, thank you, Mark, and thank you, Councillor Bryn, for the questions. In terms of the improvements to water quality and phosphates, we have had significant engagement and meetings with Cymru and Natural Resources Wales, Welsh Government. I also sit on a board of Cross Wales looking at the issue and the challenge across Wales in terms of how we ensure that we clean our waterways in the long term, not just focusing on infrastructure and engineering solutions, but also looking at nature-based solutions as well. So it is a big strategic issue in Wales, and it's something that we need to grapple with. In terms of specifically for Monmouth, we have had the reassurances from Cymru and Natural Resources Wales that phosphate stripping capability will be installed. And obviously we've had the communication from Welsh Government as well, identifying that we need to allocate and ensure that the community of Monmouth isn't left behind ultimately in terms of affordable housing provision. So in terms of us being satisfied in terms of the environmental impacts of the development, it's providing that strategic phosphate solution is installed, and we have commitment from Cymru and from Natural Resources Wales that will happen. Then we are satisfied the impact in terms of the water quality of the River Wye will be reduced actually, because the existing populations already have a harmful impact in terms of phosphate, because there isn't any phosphate stripping there at the moment. The development the phosphate stripping will allow for that reduction in phosphate emissions into the river. So it is a positive thing, and it will also allow to ensure that we ensure sustainable communities by providing housing, jobs, and those other elements which make society as well as. So there is a planning balance to be made here, and given the reassurances we've had from all those parties I've mentioned, we are confident that the development will be based on sound evidence and that it wouldn't have an impact. But that will be looked at in terms of the habitats regulations assessment. It will all be reviewed and considered as part of the plan as we move forward. In terms of best and most versatile agricultural land and the discussion around Chepstow and the difference between Bayfield and Mountain Road, yes, Planning Policy Wales is quite clear in terms of the need to protect agricultural land and the need to protect best and most versatile land. However, with all planning decisions, there is a planning balance to be made, and that is what has been made here in terms of the diagram that I showed you, into the pros and cons of each site. And in this particular instance, given the potential for commercial development and a hotel and a care home, the balance is that could be more beneficial to the settlement of Chepstow rather than allowing just the 145 homes. I think it's quite clear to us, and when we're looking at allocating sites within Monmouthshire, that we have a high level of best and most versatile land, probably more than other counties across Wales. So about 70% of our land within Monmouthshire is best and most versatile land. So inevitably, when we have very, very little brownfields, we've got 3 brownfield sites across Monmouthshire, so inevitably we are going to be impacting about on our cultural land in Monmouthshire. If we want to provide homes, provide jobs, and ensure that we have sustainable communities, we have got such a high, intense amount of both of most versatile land. So it is certainly worth thinking about. And I think the other interesting thing and interesting fact is that only 3% of the county is actually built on in terms of urban development. So when you actually put it into context, we're not talking about a significant amount of land. 97% of the land is unbuilt on and is rural in context. So I think that balance has to be made, and it is an individual decision, but it is part of the planning balance as we make these decisions.
Thank you, Craig and Mark. Next, we've got Councillor Louise Brown.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got quite a number.
I do apologise, it was Jane Lucas. Sorry.
Oh, sorry,
Can I
yeah.
just let
Thank you.
Councillor Lucas come in and then I'll
sure,
come
yeah.
straight back
Thank
to
you.
you. Apologies, Jane, you need to wave a little bit more.
Thank you, Chair. My hand was up as well. Sorry about that. Thank you both for the plan, Mark and Craig. It's very informative, and listening to your answers there, you've answered some of my questions, though I do wish to just clarify a few, if I may. So in reference to the 270 houses allocation in Monmouth, the school traffic and the traffic as it is, how are you planning to react to that, as Councillor Brenda has already pointed out, that the roundabout in the A40 is already at its capacity, particularly on a Friday afternoon, coming down, or even every morning reference the roundabout. So I do beg the question on transport issues. The infrastructure behind all of this. So we're at, for example, Osbaston Junior School has already at full capacity and has got a waiting list. So where are these children going to go to school? Are we going to be building more infrastructures, more schools, more doctors, more dentists? Where's all the infrastructure coming from, please? Because that's one of the real big question marks, surely. The landscape from the AOB, I hope that's really been considered a great deal, more than perhaps been mentioned. Greenfield and brownfield sites, are we sure there's no more brownfield sites we can be building on? And public transportation, you seriously, you want to try catching a bus here in Monmouth, it's mission impossible. To catch a bus, for it to be on time, for all the reasons above, it's just quite questionable. In the Annex 1, we've got written down that 5,400 new homes, 2,790 homes above the Welsh Government baseline. So whilst I understand what we're trying to achieve, which is, of course, affordable housing, should we be actually going to that level, bearing in mind that we are actually trying to be climate aware, and the fact that we're actually trying desperately hard to look after the phosphates issues in our surrounding waters? In reference to the phosphates, Craig has already just said, I believe, that the mitigating will happen by the treatment works. But will it mitigate sufficiently to then take on more growth? Because if you do the 270 houses that we've already earmarked in Monmouth, and you've got two other candidate sites, one in the centre, one on the edge of the other estate out on towards Wannerstow, I assume future time down the line, they're going to be coming on board. How are we going to make sure that all these phosphates issues are considered and, more importantly, adhered to? Because that's what scares me. Are we actually going to be assured, and are we actually going to, is the spade in the ground going to happen before we are 100% plus that it is safe to do so, please? And I think that pretty much covers all my questions. Yes, I think so. Thank you very much. Sorry to be repeating some of them.
Thank you, Councillor Lucas. I think Mark is going to answer these, are you?
Sorry, we're just deciding whether it's double act again. We both want to answer your questions. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Lucas. Yeah. Again, I completely understand why you're asking those questions. They're really key points for the community that you represent in a local member sense, as well as your role on this committee. So the new allocation that's proposed, in terms of things like school traffic and that infrastructure piece, that's all being looked at still, and that factors into the infrastructure plan and the voluntary local transport plan. That'll be coming forwards in due course and form part of the deposit plan or sit alongside the deposit plan. We're also doing a master planning exercise on these strategic sites with Design Commission for Wales, and that connectivity is a key part. So, I mean, obviously, connectivity from that site to the secondary schools couldn't be easier, but Osbaston Primary, which would be the catchment school, I believe, does need some thought in how pedestrians best get to and from the school from that location. So that's all being looked at. In terms of capacity of schools, for example, on the eastward expansion of Caldecott, it's proposed there'll be a new primary school on site that'll be funded by developers. That discussion's ongoing with the development to the east of Abergavenny. At the moment, the scale of development isn't big enough to need a primary school, but we're talking to education about what the longer term might look like and how that's best planned for. But there is capacity in the schools there. And where there isn't capacity, extensions to schools can be provided. So we're in ongoing conversations with education about how that infrastructure is provided. Other infrastructure such as healthcare and GP surgeries, that isn't something that we build as a council, but we're in discussions with the health board about how that's catered for. You'll appreciate 50% of these new homes will be affordable, so that's local people already in the area on our waiting list. The other 50% are potentially new to the town, but there is extra demand, so we're talking to the health board about that. And I mean, incidentally, the Dixton Road GP surgery is engaged really positively in this whole process, has put in candidate sites to suggest where they might expand to, acknowledging that their current facility is too small for their needs and they need to expand. So in the Monmouth specifics, we're at a quite advanced stage of that process. That GP surgery has been really, really engaged in this process. The other two bits I noted down were Greenfield versus Brownfield and public transport, although I think there's some bits after that as well that I'll ask Craig to pick up on. Greenfield versus Brownfield, I mean, you've got that local knowledge as well. If there are Brownfield sites you're aware of, you can suggest. Still time for us to hear them at the deposit plan stage, but we've done a specific call for brownfield sites right at the start of the process, and barely anything came forward. We've gone through all of the candidate sites and looked at which of them are brownfield or partially brownfield, and where applicable sought to prioritise those for the deposit plan. But obviously that's in a wider context. It's not just any brownfield site anywhere. They don't always make sense, but there are very few opportunities. But if you do know of more that aren't covered by current candidate site proposals, then please do let us know. Craig, you happy picking up the other bits?
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Chair. Just to build on what Mark said about Councillor Lucas about the school education and the infrastructure around that, we are engaged with the local education authority. You are correct in relation to Osbaston Primary, and they might be at capacity and may be difficult to accommodate pupils. However, they have indicated to us there's surplus capacity at Cummins View and Overview mono-primary schools, and they're both within reasonable walking distance. So we'll keep working with the local education authority on that in relation to primary schools, and ensure that there is that. And we could ask for Section 106 financial contributions from the developer if there is a need for additional primary school facilities in the future as well. So we can certainly look at that and keep reviewing that, but just to make you aware that we are having those conversations with the local education authority. And they have highlighted that they may also the additional growth might result in some additional demand in relation to Monmouth Comprehensive School as well, and they have indicated about 57 potentially secondary age pupils might be needed. So again, we would be in communication with the developer about Section 106 contributions to help finance some of that additional growth and to support Monmouth Comprehensive. But these are all going to be ongoing discussions that we have as we develop the deposit plan and ensuring that the infrastructure is there for these communities that we are going to create. In terms of the traffic implications, Monmouth as it is coming into the process at this stage. We've obviously had conversations with highway colleagues, but as part of the deposit plan, we will certainly be going out and consulting with Welsh Government and Trunk Roads regards to the impact that that site has on the roundabout. So we'll get all that information support from that stage, and the applicant will have to provide and ensure that the development doesn't have a harmful impact in terms of highway safety. So there'll be full transport assessments, and this will run alongside the local transport plan as well, which will be developed alongside alongside the replacement local development plan. So all of that, again, is being looked at and reviewed. Obviously, Monmouth is coming in at this stage, so it wasn't previously a strategic site. So there is a lot still to consider as we move forward, but there's no reason from the candidate assessment work that's been done so far to suggest that development would have an adverse impact on highway safety or traffic movements. And again, when we go up to the community in next spring, we'll have all that information on a local transport plan to evidence and show that that development can be supported. So that insurance of the transport, appreciate that there might be some congestion there at the moment, but it will be looked at and reviewed in terms of that planning balance and making that overall distinction against highway safety. The AOMB and landscape impact, yes, so that will certainly be looked at and reviewed as we move forward, as well as other considerations. And I would also open the door again in terms of relation to the brownfield discussion. We have got very limited brownfield in Monmouthshire, and it'd be great if we could ensure that we have those sites come forward. But we will be prioritising brownfield in this plan. So any brownfields that have come forward will have that preferential treatment as being allocated in the deposit plan. Thank you, Councillor.
Chair, could I? Just one question back.
Can Mark just come in there, because he's shown an interest to come back in, and then I'll let you come back in.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Lucas. I was just mindful there's a part of your question we hadn't quite answered, I don't think, Councillor Lucas, where I think you were asking about the overall level of growth and whether that was appropriate or avoided the problems if it was reduced. So on page 3 of the Welsh Government's response, which is Appendix 1, third paragraph from the bottom, they explicitly say the level of growth proposed in a preferred strategy is justified by the need to significantly increase the supply of affordable housing whilst not diverting growth away from the national growth area or have adverse effects on phosphate pollution. So they do accept the level of growth that's now proposed. Under the previous strategy, which I'm not sure the extent to which all members followed that before the elections, but it was proposing a higher level of growth for the county, which was rejected by the Welsh Government. So in terms of the overall level growth, the Welsh Government agrees as well that it's needed to deal with the affordable housing challenge we have in the county. And if we were to shrink that level of growth, then we don't address that challenge sufficiently. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lucas. Do you want to come back in there?
Yes, please, if I may. Just a couple of things. One was I forgot to mention value for jobs. We've got to have the jobs that match the housing, and that's a real big question. But we've just mentioned about the schools now, and there's places available in Overmono and over at Wisham. Now, for obvious reasons, having spent this morning, for example, stuck in traffic, I can clearly tell you that, especially on a wet day, despite us going to great efforts to build a pedestrian bridge, I do hope continues to happen, and anything else that we might be doing in reference to active travel, which is wonderful. Come rainy days or whatever, parents are going to want to drive their kids to school. Now, if the school is over at Wisham, then we are going to increase the traffic problem, because trust me, on a rainy day, everybody drives their kids to school, and you can guarantee the kids are going to the wrong school. They go past the nearest one and go to the furthest one because of the catchment issues and placements. So could we look at perhaps providing minibuses to provide transportation, so it's one vehicle as opposed to 20 vehicles going to said schools? There's just a thought whether that could be looked at, because it just seems obvious to me. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I'll raise that with my colleagues in the passenger transport unit who deal with school transport. I'm not sure off the top of my head of the distances, whether they be within kind of free school transport distances or beyond. It would depend on the primary school in question, but I'll certainly raise that suggestion. Thanks.
Probably not, but there you go. More cars.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Councillor Lucas. Next, we got Councillor Louise Brown and then Councillor Thomas Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I've got about 5 or 6 different areas I want to raise. I don't know whether I could do that in one go, or if you want me to split it at all.
Let's see how we get on.
Yeah, okay. When the Place Committee considered the Forest of Dean plan, and basically Monmouthshire County Council decided that they couldn't support the plan without a bypass for Chepstow and also active travel measures. Well, the same applies to this plan as well, because Chepstow, the Forest of Dean are going to have, this is from memory, and I've looked at it more closely when we looked at it in Place Committee before, but I think there was about 3,000 houses, about 1,700 in Lydney and about 800 at the barracks at Beachley in Sudbury, Chepstow, and effectively you know, because of all this housing, and a lot of it coming from Lydney to Bristol through Chepstow and the congestion in that direction, then that was the reason why we said that. And I think the same applies to this particular plan. The infrastructure concerns are obviously one of the main issues, and in the Welsh Government points, and I'll go back to them in more detail, one of the things that they were saying was about, considering other adjoining local authorities. Now, the Forest of Dean for the Chepstow area is an important local authority to consider, and all the housing they're having on that side means the traffic coming into Chepstow from that area. But then also we've got the issue that this plan, most of the development is in the south of the county, where there's already 80% of the development. To consider Sevenside, Caldicot and Chepstow as separate areas beggars belief, because they're very close together, and the traffic impacts also affect that area. So in other words, from the Caldicot side and Carwent side, they'll come into the A48 Portney area, which will increase the traffic to the High Beach roundabout, which is already over capacity from highway studies in both England and Wales. Now, coming also to the Mountain Road site, which is said to replace the Bayfield site, a lot of the objections for the Bayfield site were due to the traffic congestion, including the High Beach roundabout. Now, it's quite often that traffic is queued up right to the bottom of St Lawrence's Road and also to the bottom of Portney Hill. And even Greg's, which was a development that happened at the garage on the A48 towards the town, has significantly caused queues going from Portney into town as a result of that small extra turning off, because the traffic is so bad. Now, it is beyond belief, in my view, that Mountain Road site, right next to the High Beach roundabout, should actually be proposed as an area for development, which will put even more pressure on this particular roundabout. It is also contrary to council policy, because we passed a motion in council to say that we would support well-tagged studies in terms of improvement of the High Beach roundabout. Now, the well-tagged study 1 basically says that there's only two options for improving the High Beach roundabout itself. The first option was to close the Fairview entrance. Now, that wouldn't work, because the idea is that the traffic would go through Bulwark and then they'd possibly join through the Mathern Road with a link onto the A466. Now, that wouldn't work because there's no two-way traffic. Even turning into the junction at Bulwark is a problem getting in and out, and the chicanes are there as you go through, so it's not two-way traffic. You turn right into Mathern Road. Most of the houses there do not have off-street parking, so there's only one-way traffic there, and to suggest a volume of traffic going that way as an alternative to join the motorway just wouldn't work. And that was one option within the existing options. And then the second option option was basically to improve High Beach roundabout by allocating further land. Now, the further land is actually on Mountain Road site, and you can see that if you look in Appendix O and Appendix N of the WellTag study. So basically, if you develop Mountain Road site, you ruin any chance whatsoever of improving High Beach roundabout and the options there, which definitely does need improving. And coming back to the site itself, there was a planning application which was DC/2013/00571, and there was plenty of reasons why that site itself was rejected. I appreciate that the boundaries of Chepstow have changed, but it's still within the green wedge, which is the Bayfield site is not, and it is to do with the coalescence of Portney, Mountain and Chepstow, which it will have an impact on. And the only access I can see onto the site is on St Lawrence's Road, and again that will impact traffic coming in and out. Looking at what happened on that particular site, it was a very badly drawn concept drawing, and you can't have traffic accessing the A48 Portney because the road is narrow. It's only got a narrow pavement on one side. And effectively, the only way you can do it is basically looking at St Lawrence Road. Now, St Lawrence Road, in this plan, it had an emergency access in the middle of it, which people didn't think could be used properly, and then it had another access onto St Lawrence Road, and again that would cause terrible extra jams on St Lawrence Road coming into it. And to have a hotel and care home there, I just don't know how people will get in and out of it. And in terms of obviously destroying the green wedge, the other reason why that site is very important is as you come into Chepstow off the motorway, it's the gateway showing that Monmouthshire and advertising Monmouthshire is a green county and it's a rural county, and that is one of the tourism reasons that people actually come to Monmouthshire, which will be destroyed if there's all housing on that particular site. And obviously there was minerals issues, there was also issues of the listed building and the landscape and the ANOB, as well as the agricultural land being used there. So I don't think that this is feasible. The other thing is that this site also relied on a transport plan from the Welsh Government. It was an earlier transport plan, and it was to do with Welsh Government improvements to High Beach roundabout, which unfortunately have never happened. And there was also a plan for Taylor Wimpey, who were the applicants for the site, to sign a Section 106 agreement to help with highway improvements. Taylor Wimpey were not prepared to sign this, not prepared to, contribute towards these improvements. And in addition, the site says, oh, we can get across to Pembroke. Well, they won't pay for pedestrian crossings or traffic lights. And if you look at the idea of having 50% affordable housing, you'll have a look at this full report of 400 pages, and you'll see comments from the developers who say that they're not, they're arguing for 35% affordable housing. And, this was one of the points that was put forward in the Welsh Government response. You won't get the viability of the sites without a significant funding from the Welsh Government. So to make this site viable, we need millions of pounds spent on improving the High Beach roundabout. We need a Chepstow bypass, and we also need M48 links. And that's the only way that all of this housing can actually be sustained. And, you know, in terms of spatial distribution, which was the point that was being made today, you know, the fact that these areas, Meager-Undy, basically, Caldicot and Chepstow, they're all linked in terms of traffic. And when the bridge isn't working, then there's not only queues on the A48 and everywhere else is a standstill. It goes back as far as Meager and Undy as well. So, you know, I'm just astounded by the idea that Mountain Road would be a better option. But I mean, both of them, Bayfield and Mountain Road, the traffic issue is such that we can't have these developments without the infrastructure improvements, and we can't rely on the developers to do this, because we've already seen in the Fairfield Maybe site that effectively the level of housing was kept below a threshold so that the developer wouldn't have to contribute to any of the injunction improvements at Tesco. So, you know, this is one of the concerns. And then if you go to the sorry, my thing's gone. If you go and have a look at the Welsh Government things, it says key areas include economic growth levels, in other words, proving that the jobs are going to come internally rather than, as most people say, they'll come from Bristol, being the whole of the southern area of Monmouthshire effectively becoming a suburb of Bristol, effectively. Relationship to adjoining authorities, don't just look at Welsh authorities, look at English authorities as well. We seem to be short-sighted in terms of just looking at the impact of Newport, for example, but these other areas are for do it as well. Ensuring the delivery of 50% affordable housing allocations. Well, you won't do this without a substantial monies from Welsh Government, and without this, the plan is unsound. Site delivery implementation. Now, obviously, financial viability won't work because they won't provide the things that we need to make the sites work. I mean, phosphates and nutrient neutrality, we've got a problem with sewerage areas, and I'm regularly in meetings with the Water Board about the problems of sewage in Mountain, Portmeric and Shire Newton, because the pipe is beyond the capacity. They're doing lining works and all sorts of things looking at it. But, you know, you can't add, and I don't know what the sewage situation is in Chepstow or where this would join any of the sewage systems. But, you know, in Monmouth as well, you can't assume that the sewage systems are going to work, because a lot of them are Victorian, and to add extra to that. So, you know, I just think that there's a lot of issues there that haven't actually been properly covered. And it's no good presenting this to us today without us knowing what the infrastructure plans are, because none of these can go ahead without significant millions being spent on improving the road structure. And I'm sorry if I've sounded like I'm standing on ground preaching, but also I would add that if people want to look up the application for the Bayfield, which was withdrawn, which is DM/2019/0013, you'll find that a lot of the objections there were also based on the fact that Chepstow often grinds to a standstill. And we haven't got the public regular transport for people to cut down the traffic. So, I mean, perhaps some members from Caldicot will add points about that, or from Portskewett about how awful the road infrastructure is at the moment. And unfortunately, we can't all walk and go on our bike. The A48 to Portmeric is, quite frankly, would be dangerous if you were going to cycle there. I mean, a pedestrian
Can we
is...
allow officers to come in and answer? Because
Okay, thank you.
you've contributed an awful lot there, all very, very valid points.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Brown. We'll do a tag team again. Loads of points in there, largely around transport infrastructure. But I was typing key points as you were going. So the point you make about the objection to the Forest of Dean plan, yeah, completely understand that, and that is something that we're working through. It is worth just drawing you back to the actual response that was sent. Says that we support their aspirations for growth and aren't wishing to hinder them, but they do need to have an integrated package of transport improvements in place, which could include, and then lists a number of things. So our response didn't say must have a Chepstow bypass. That was in the list of projects that could be included.
Yeah, it did say include it.
Could include, not must include. So just to clarify that wording that was sent back. There are ongoing discussions with Welsh Government around various bits of infrastructure, including High Beach and with neighbours around the idea of a relief road, but they aren't making the progress that we'd want, and Councillor Griffiths will be saying the same on that front. So that's work that's still needed. Helpful point about the land at the front of the Mountain Road site potentially being needed for the WellTag 1, so we'll go back and review that, but it's perfectly possible for the LDP to safeguard that if that is needed. I think you're right in what you're saying, Councillor Brown, that the transport and infrastructure related objections to Bayfield site relate equally to Mountain Road, and we acknowledge that. So yeah, switching from one site to the other doesn't change that issue. It's more looking at which site's best to come forward. In terms of that kind of entry into Chepstow and into the AONB beyond, and it being sort of a gateway to the Green County, that landscape impact is certainly something for us to consider. I'm certainly comfortable that could happen acceptably, and I certainly wouldn't say that it would destroy tourism. In fact, it gives provision for a hotel which would enhance tourism at that key gateway site. So that could be a real benefit to that site, and that is one of the benefits of that one over Bayfields. The wider viability concerns, I'll come back to that last point first, the Green Wedge coalescence. Yeah, again, that's a consideration for the LDP and the deposit plan. As you know, the Green Wedge is an existing LDP allocation that gets reviewed as part of the LDP. So just because it's currently Green Wedge doesn't automatically preclude it from being allocated for development in the RLDP. That's one of the considerations that's open to you as councillors. I would suggest that there's plenty of scope to retain the Green Wedge west of this site to prevent that coalition with Portney without this harm in that. But that's one for you to decide at deposit plan stage in due course. In that regards, reference is made to the 2013 application on the site and reasons for refusal. So members might recall that was a period when national policy around housing land availability was slightly different. So we had to have a 5-year housing land supply. It was changed. It was up to us how much weight we gave to that, and we were looking at sites outside of the LDP at that stage. That's all changed. But the one thing via appeal decisions that stood out at that time was your lack of 5-year housing land supply did not outweigh Green Wedge. And that's why one of the reasons that application was refused at that time. So that wasn't to say it could never happen, but that it needs to come through an LDP process. Some of those other reasons for refusal would need to be looked at as part of any allocation or future developments. But again, I think the reason for refusal around section 106 wasn't that Taylor Wimpey refused to sign it. It was that there wasn't one before committee at that time. So it's standard practice to include that as a reason for refusal. So it's mopped up if there were to be a planning appeal. So there are those main points on that front. The affordable housing viability and viability of sites generally is, a huge piece of ongoing work. The emphasis behind the levels of growth in the LDP are 50% affordable housing and delivering that massive aspiration and need. And I would probably suggest that's a cross-party agreement, that is a huge need that we need to deliver. the alternative to delivering that figure of affordable housing via 50% sites is to have a lower percentage and a higher level of growth, which was the last strategy, which you know, I know you were concerned about, Councillor Brown, at that time, and that higher level of growth, and that's something that Welsh Government's rejected. So those discussions about how these sites work, if there's a different way of using social housing grants, and Welsh Government flexing on their policies, that's all still to be discussed. But that 50% policy is that objective that the council requires to be met. Jobs-wise and commuting, the economic development strategy, or the employment and economy and employment skills strategy, is being worked on and is coming before members in due course. But we're working with that process to look at where the jobs will go, how that all fits together, and where those allocations are. And again, switching to Mountain Road allows for some employment to be included in a way that Bayfield did not. So that would actually be a benefit of this approach. But yeah, we are looking cross-border, eastwards and westwards in that approach. Craig, is there anything else to mop up? There's a comment about sewage infrastructure, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Chair. Yes, a few other little things I've noted down here. So sewerage in Chepstow will certainly have consulted Cummins Welsh Water. They haven't objected in relation to sewerage capacity at this stage to 145 homes in that area. And again, we'll be continuing to have those conversations and dialogue as we move forward with the deposit plan to ensure there is capacity in that sewerage. And if there isn't, we have noticed in other areas across Monmouthshire, they have objected or raised concerns with regard to sewage capacity, and therefore we're avoiding those settlements. Chepstow isn't one of those, and neither are those primary settlements that we're talking about today. So certainly it is being indicated to us from Cummins Welsh Water that there is that capacity available. I just want to pick back up on the 50% affordable housing and the viability challenge that we have. I think as officers, we are aware of the viability challenge, and some sites are going to need additional funding, but if that is the planning policy framework within Monmouthshire, we have to be strong in that regard in terms of our planning decisions moving forward. That is our planning policy framework. It is 50%. And when we go to examination and the plan is tested in terms of its soundness, that all will be looked at in terms of viability and that planning policy framework. And in future years to come, we have to stand strong on that 50% and not allow for a lower percentage of affordable housing. And that is going to be down to the power and the will of the planning committee and elected members. So I think, you know, it's about ensuring that planning policy framework is adopted and put in place, and then having the will and the strength to adhere to that policy moving forward, then and ensuring that we do deliver those affordable housing. And Welsh Government have indicated to us that the reason why we've got to the level of growth is to ensure that we meet that housing need. So to me, that 50% affordable housing policy is what is the foundations of that. And if developers or public funding can't come forward to develop it, then potentially we don't build out those sites. You know, that's the reason why they're there for, to deliver affordable housing, the affordable housing-led policy. So I think it is an interesting question around 50% affordable housing, and it's something that certainly will be examined and looked at as part of the test of soundness as we move forward with the plan. In terms of the infrastructure, I think we talked a lot about that today. There's the economic development strategy, the local transport plan. All of these things are being looked at as outlined in the slides. So I appreciate those concerns, Councillor Brown's, and we still have to look at the replacement local development plan being a land allocation policy. There are other tools in the council's gift that they need to establish to ensure that development can happen. So this isn't being looked at on its own in isolation. This is an integrated approach, and council elected members will be able to look at those plans as they develop in the next few months. So all of this information is coming, and will be alongside the replacement local development to give you that confidence that work is being done. I think in terms of the previous planning application on Mountain Road, I think Mark's already covered it, but there are, you know, this is a different plan now. Ultimately, there are going to be sites that unfortunately were refused previously for good reason. Now, given where we are with other sites being developed out, they might be appropriate choices moving forward, and there are ways that we can mitigate against some of those implications, particularly around the listed buildings and ensure landscape impact. There are things that we can do to ensure that development doesn't have an harmful impact or an adverse impact on those aspects. So it's about working through some of those elements, I think, as we move up to the deposit plan. I think that covers most of the points, but if there's anything else, I'm happy to take supplementary questions.
We
Would you like to come back in there, Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I think quite a lot of things were missed there. I mean, obviously there is a listed building, and you know, it is ANOB, and it would. I mean, you've said about the hotel and tourism, but obviously in terms of tourism, and that's one of the main roads that people, when they come into Monmouthshire, go down, and if they see it's just houses and houses, then, you know, how will you promote the lovely green rural aspect of Monmouthshire, which is one of the reasons people actually come and visit Monmouthshire. And I think it has obviously more of an impact because of it being the main road. And obviously, although I'm not in favour of the other site doesn't have the green wedge issues, and it doesn't have the immediate impact on the High Beach roundabout that this particular site would have. In terms of the Welsh Government, I was a bit disappointed that in their letter it says the key areas, there is absolutely no mention of infrastructure and transport. You know, are they not aware of the problems and issues that we've got in this particular county? I'm absolutely shocked that that wasn't included. And with regard to relationship to adjoining local authorities, please can you ensure that this includes English authorities as well as those within Wales? And obviously there was no particular answer to that. And I am concerned about the 50% affordable housing allocation, because obviously in terms of viability, the developers have to have a percentage profit level. Now, if more of their profit is going into affordable housing, there'll be less money for education, for road improvements, for pedestrian crossings, for traffic lights, and all these extra things that are needed to mitigate development. So it's not just a question of saying, you know, can we persuade developers to change from their 35% to 50%? It's saying, what about all of these other monetary things? Like, I mean, even in, you know, some areas there may be a necessity for another GP surgery or extensions to existing surgeries. And, you know, there is a limited finance, and these, you know, the developers will just walk away. And I don't think that at the moment that this plan convinces me that we are going to have those necessarily infrastructure issues and solving them. I think what's just going to happen is that the southern area of Monmouthshire is just going to become completely jammed.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Craig, would you like to come in there? And then I've got Councillor Davis, Councillor Strong, and I know Councillor Taylor is then going to join us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's just to clarify a few points there for you, Councillor Brown, just so that everything's clear and transparent. In terms of the AOMB boundary, it's that green line on the image you can see above. So Mountain Road is actually outside of the AOMB. It doesn't sit within it. So it's just one consideration in terms of landscape impact, in terms of where that line is. It doesn't sit within the AOMB. It is potentially a green wedge, but that is a local designation in terms of the existing local development plan. So we will review that as part of the replacement local development plan, and if it's needed for housing requirement and housing need. In terms of coalescence with Portney, there is, you know, this field here between Mountain Road and Woodlands Grove, that section would still remain undeveloped. So we're talking about just the St Lawrence Lane being the boundary of the development. So there wouldn't be a coalescence of those two settlements. Admittedly, it would come closer, but just in terms of showing you and highlighting the fact that Chepstow would remain Chepstow, it sits outside the AOMB. Appreciate the comments that have been made with regards to the listed building, other elements. As I said, I think as we work up the plan, the master plan for this site with Design Commission for Wales, we can ensure that listed building is protected and ensure that the impact on the wider landscape is also protected. I just thought that might sort of highlight and clarify that point with regards to the landscape. In terms of the viability, Councillor Brown, again, it is being looked at by an external viability consultant. So as part of the last LDP, developers didn't have to evidence via viability assessment how they were going to deliver affordable housing, education infrastructure, recreational infrastructure. As part of this replacement local development plan, they have to, it's part of the manual, it's part of the legislation, they have to evidence that they are going to deliver, showing their profit levels, showing what they're going to deliver. So all of that has been submitted as part of a full viability assessment of each individual candidate site, and that has been reviewed by an external viability consultant. And there is a member workshop to look at this, I think at the end of this year, beginning of next, where we can look at those viability and look at how that external consultant has done that. So it is a step change from the previous LDP. There's a lot more work going into these allocating of sites, and they need to evidence it. And then we're planning to have a statement of common ground between the developer and the council to ensure that the viability assessment is stuck to. So there is sort of legal weight to ensure that moving forward there's a requirement for them to get the profit, but also deliver the requirements that we need to deliver sustainable communities moving forward. So there is a change ultimately from the last LDP to this replacement local development plan, which hopefully will give us the confidence that that 50% will be delivered on site.
Okay. Councillor Brown,
yeah, just very quickly, it will shrink the green wedge. Thank you.
Councillor Davis, would you like to come in now?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, officers. A couple of questions, if I may, on the proposed Abergavenny East site. Notwithstanding the welcome upgrades to both the train station, the proposed development of the cycle footpath, the footbridge over the A465, it's very likely that there will be a considerable bottleneck on that stretch of road along the A465 down towards the Hardwick roundabout, both, of course, from the initial preparation and the development phase of the proposed Abergavenny East site, and then from the ultimate build and the delivery of the 500 or so dwellings on that site of land. Can officers perhaps tell us a bit more about what modelling have you conducted to date on the likely impact on traffic volume and particularly emissions on that stretch of road approaching the Hardwick junction, given also that the papers tabled today also anticipate some considerable delay to the delivery of that site, given the proposed scale of the development and the complexities involved in its delivery. And I suppose related to that, a further question, if I may, Chair, as well. I note again the papers tabled today notes that that parcel of land by the A465 Hardwick roundabout is designated as having both high landscape sensitivity to residential development in the landscape sensitivity update, as well as being a productive and utilised parcel of precious agricultural land. So again, perhaps with the avoidance of doubt, could officers both explain and reassure concerned residents, both in Abergavenny and its vicinity, particularly my ward of Llanfoist and Llanellan, that notwithstanding these important characteristics, why a development of this scale and magnitude continues to be the favoured proposal for this stretch of land? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Davis.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Davis. So two key points there. In terms of the A465 and modelling, we're working with the site promoters on that at the moment and got a meeting coming up with Sutra, because the A465 there's a trunk road. Very much looking at how that road can actually be civilised and brought down to a more kind of residential scale. We need some traffic data on the actual usage, but local feeling from other members has been that it isn't actually that highly trafficked. So we're going to collect that data and see what that looks like. But clearly it still forms a key part of the highway network, heading up to Hereford. So we need to factor that in carefully. That's being looked at in the context of how do we get from the development to the railway line, and then clearly needs a bridge over the railway line. So that bit of work's all still taking place. That connectivity is absolutely key, because we don't want people to just be jumping in their cars and getting onto the Hardwick roundabout and then either driving into town or driving elsewhere. yeah, as the crow flies, it's really close. You know, you couldn't get closer to the station if you tried, and it's also close to the town centre. So, yeah, getting that connectivity is our objective, and we're working on that now. In terms of site choices and things like high landscape sensitivity and B&V land, there's some maps that we went through probably a couple of years ago now, looking at the different options. Most of our towns are surrounded by best and most versatile agricultural land and surrounded by areas of higher landscape sensitivity. And when you look at the areas of lower sensitivity and lower agricultural land value, they are typically in floodplains, so we're ruled out for that reason. So it's trying to find the sites that work best. So we've had to accept, and you know, if we proceed with this, council will need to accept that we need to develop in some areas that are sensitive in terms of landscape and are best and most versatile agricultural land, because they are the best options that we have in terms of making a development work in the most rounded sense. So we didn't have any options that were better in this context, and in terms of how you grow Abergavenny now and in the longer term, taking that bold step to go east of the A465 seemed like the right one to make, and by and large was the favoured site when we did a previous consultation in Abergavenny. Of the three options, this was the preferred option. So, you know, we can't pretend there won't be landscape harm. We can't pretend there won't be a loss of B&V land, because there will be. But this is considered to be the best compromise in that sense. Landscape sensitivity can be mitigated in terms of how schemes are designed and laid out. Also looking at things like sort of the contours up the Skirvach and how far up it extends, to minimise that and make it blend into the landscape sensitivity. And again, I mentioned earlier, we're doing master planning with Design Commission for Wales, and we've gone through kind of the site selection process and how we can work on this, and they've been supportive of that kind of general direction of travel.
Councillor Davis, do you have any further questions, or is Mark?
No, thank you, Chair. That's very helpful, and I appreciate the clarity from officers. Thanks.
Lovely, thank you. Next, I've got Councillor Jackie Strong, then I've got Councillor Taylor, Councillor Crook, then Councillor Tudor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to thank the members of the public that came to us in the beginning of the meeting. I thought it was really helpful, and I don't want to steal any thunder away from the local members in Mager and Undy, but I just want to kind of, my thoughts are that we can't look at Caldicot East in isolation to what's happened along Severn-side. Over the last few weeks, I've been shocked by the lack of green space in Mager and Undy. I mean, as a Caldicot resident for the last 30 years or so, I've seen all along that B4245, you know, the growth along there has been huge, but I don't think I actually realised how much green space has been lost, and I think we should be really careful to actually not impinge on any more green space than that. I think it's as built up as it needs to be, really. Anyway, I'm going to park that first off. I've got a question about, because I didn't understand, I just want a bit of clarification, really. The 100 MOD houses from the potential Caldicot East site. Craig, I think you mentioned that wouldn't impact on the affordable number, or the number that we need to allocate as a council, is that right? So if you just clarify that, because I didn't quite understand that. I do have opening up the Cowent site to the new barracks and the new sort of relocation. That is going to cause sort of more traffic along the A448. We've got huge amount of problems along the B4245 at the moment. And I really welcome that you're looking at a new school within that site, because we were sat here a couple of weeks ago talking about ARW school being, nearly oversubscribed, Councillor Dimmock. But also in my ward, just outside my ward, we've got Castle Park that is looking to increase numbers as well. So that we can't look at all of this development in isolation. We've mentioned it before on our sort of scrutiny meetings. Infrastructure is key, and I get that there will be transport sort of, plans and other things alongside, but we need some reassurance that it's not just sort of pie in the sky, that it really will happen alongside this. We need to take people in Caldecott and along Sevenside with us. I really understand that we've got an ageing population. We need to keep local people and local families within our county. We need to provide really good jobs, but we also need the infrastructure to support that. So my question really is just about the MOD stuff and some reassurance, really. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Strong. Officers?
Thank you, Councillor Strong. Yes, you're right in terms of the Ministry of Defence housing. That's outside of a housing requirement. So this has been given to us by the Ministry of Defence, really, as a request that they need that accommodation, of a service family accommodation for proposed extensions to the barracks, which is a national security, obviously, element in terms of, and they've had those conversations with Welsh Government directly in terms of the barracks sites. So that's something that we need to consider moving forward. And that land that we allocate for that will be ring-fenced for the Ministry of Defence only, so it wouldn't be providing any affordable housing contributions, but it would potentially have to provide contributions towards education, towards recreational needs, etc. So there might be some Section 106 requirements for other elements, but not necessarily for affordable housing, and they would be ring-fenced by a legal agreement. They could only be accommodated for service family accommodation associated with the Ministry of Defence. So that is, you are right in that, in terms of that sits outside of that element. I 100% agree.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, sure.
Can I just ask some clarity on this? I understand that if Beachley closes the barracks entirely, they'll actually be looking for 300 houses, not 100. Is that true?
Chair, we've asked directly the Ministry of Defence to give us a figure, and they've given us 100 homes. That's what they've said, and we've made them aware today that we're making it public in terms of the amount of homes that have been allocated, and they've given us the figure of 100. So they might be looking for that surplus elsewhere, not necessarily within Monmouthshire, but that is the figure that's been given to us by the Ministry of Defence.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah, no, it's okay. Sorry, Chair, it's fine. I was just going to say, I agree with you, Councillor Strong, in terms of the concerns around infrastructure. As officers, we want to ensure that we create sustainable communities, and as a council, we all want to create sustainable communities in terms of the objective of the replacement local development plan. We need to ensure the infrastructure plan is robust and resilient. We need to ensure the economic development strategy, and all I would say is to look at the council calendar moving forward. You'll see those meetings in your diaries in terms of us working on those plans together and ensuring that all of these things do align. So all of that work is happening. And it's about the ongoing conversation, but I echo everything you say, that we need to ensure the infrastructure is there alongside this development proposals. Mark, did you want to come in on the green space element?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think I just want to acknowledge the comments made around green space. We've heard the message from the public speakers earlier about the growth of Mega with Undy in the past 20, 30, 40 years, and their feeling of being a little bit swamped by it. Just want to say, we hear you. Councillor Griffiths has made it clear to us as officers, he's heard that message as well. All of that consideration comes into the deposit plan. So at the moment, we're looking at the 4 strategic sites, one around each of our main towns. There are other smaller sites, and they'll be chosen from the candidate sites that have come in. That will be subject to sort of further scrutiny and public consultation in the spring. In terms of the plan that was handed round earlier, so this one that was on a slide as well, that just highlights all of the candidate sites that have come in black and existing bits of existing development. We had probably 3 times more candidate sites than we need in terms of housing numbers. So we're absolutely nowhere near needing all of the candidate sites that have been submitted that you'll have seen in the register. And you'll see from the table in the slides and in the document that most of the growth we're looking at in terms of new allocations is in the strategic sites. So as an example, on the slide, we're looking at a total for new housing allocations in Caldecott, including Sevenside, of 825, and the figure on the next slide is showing that 735 of those are on the Caldecott East, or currently proposed to be on the Caldecott East strategic site. So, we're not talking about a vast number of other houses in addition to that. If that makes sense, but we do understand that. I think in terms of your future consideration and deliberations, it'd be worth you bearing in mind there's two aspects to the green space argument. So there's loss of agricultural land, so as a visual bit of green space, but most of that isn't accessible to the public. You might have a public right of way through it, but otherwise, it's not the kind of place you could take your kids to play or walk the dog. What has happened with some of those developments in Mega with Undies has opened up areas to the public that weren't previously open to them. But that doesn't mean that we don't accept that there's an open space play deficit. And Mike Moran's been working on that, and we're working on how that links in with the LDP as well. So development doesn't necessarily mean a loss of publicly accessible open space. It can actually create opportunities, but it does most of the time result in a loss of visually green space, farmers' fields, unless we're on brownfield sites. So it's worth thinking about sort of both those elements of that argument as we go forwards in preparing the plan.
Thank you, Mark. I think what I'll do is I'll keep it to members of the committee. So I'll go to John, Councillor Crook, then Councillor Tudor-Thomas, and then I'll bring in non-members. Is that okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. While I'm talking, I wonder whether somebody could put this map up on the screen, please, so it would make it easier for understanding where I'm coming from. This map that we had previously. Yeah. Can I first of all thank the residents for putting over their concerns and issues admirably, really, of which I agree with most of their comments and concerns. Vinegar Hill, for an example, and Rockfield Farm. Vinegar Hill, I was at a meeting with Councillor Brown some years ago, and we made very much objections of keeping it as open space and green fields. That didn't happen, we were overruled. Rockfield Farm was exactly the same, but if I... The map is not up here, is it? If I go to the map, can't put it up. Yeah, if I go to the map and you look at the two black sites to the right of it, and these, I think, are projected for building in the future. I've made it quite clear to both the officers in question and to the cabinet member that this is absolutely ridiculous. We need these open spaces, even if they're open spaces in woodland, for these new residents coming into both sites, Vinegar Hill and Rockfield Farm. And I will not give up on that, and I'm lobbying all the time for that to happen. Certainly, the one to the left, which is the big black field at Blenheim next to the 4810. Again, the officers and the cabinet member are quite clear of my intentions of what we need to do, and that needs to be taken out of the LDP going forward, as we have and had and more of our fair share of housing in LDP in Mega and Undy. It was very concerns about the infrastructure. Again, the officers in question know how long I've been on and knocking the drum and making sure about infrastructure, and we need infrastructure. And I know it's been going on all day, but it is important for Mega and Undy. We need to have these open spaces and infrastructure in all manners, whether it's dentists, doctors. I'm talking to the doctor's surgery in Grey Hill against an Iron Bevan, and we're coming to a brick wall. But we need to open these doctor's surgeries and offer the facilities for these people coming into the area. May I congratulate the person who produced this map, which makes it very clear indeed as to the issues and situations we are in Mega. I just need to to reassure people that we need to stop any more building in Mager and Undy, and we need to get the infrastructure right for these people coming into the area. The other thing I want to mention is the MOD. It's obviously the new barracks is the new concept of any barracks that's going to be built in the future, whereas in the past the majority of dwellings for the people have in the past been built inside the barracks. I question why we need to change that situation, because at Cowent there are a lot of ground and a lot of property available to build their own houses inside the barracks. That will stop all this traffic, pollution. We are hitting the drum and asking people to cycle and walk, but we're now encouraging people to drive at least 4 or 5 miles from one site to another. So I would ask the officers and the cabinet member to look at it very, very closely. But certainly I would go back to the 2 plots of land which are north of Rockfield. I really, really want you to take on board that needs to be open spaces, even wooded area. These people need somewhere to go. We're encouraging them from all over the place. Families, we're having affordable homes. I think it's 27. What are they going to do? We have had more than our fair share of building in Mager and Undy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Mark, do you want to take this?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And just very briefly, so all of those considerations around candidate sites will be part of the deposit plan in the spring, and that will come before this committee with your agreement, Chair, but I'd be surprised if you said no. Come before this committee prior to consultation for a bit more of that discussion, so then you'll know which of these smaller sites are proposed to go into the plan. But I've heard what you're saying, Councillor Crook. In terms of the MOD, it's commonplace for to have a single person's occupation within the wire and family accommodation outside. So with the family accommodation, the 100 homes, we're talking about the husbands, wives, partners and children of people in the forces. So actually, by putting them on the Caldecott East development, you'd be reducing travel because those children were going to school and the nearest school would be in Caldecott, not Cowent, using the amenities in the shops. We discussed different options with the MOD, including options in Cowent itself, outside the wire, and their preference is the Caldecott East area because of the connection to amenities for future residents and the families of their military personnel. So hopefully that explains a little bit better that rationale.
And just say before any further decisions are made on Blenheim area and on the 2 plots of ground on Rockfield, could I request certainly a meeting with all concerned councillors in the area?
Yes, thanks, Chair, and thanks to the officers for the plan today, and very much to the members of the public who've obviously and certainly enlightened me in terms of the issues down in Sevenside. It's more very brief comments, but in my mind, an RDLP is an aspirational document. And perhaps some people would say, well, let's have any development at all, and that would satisfy some people, but it wouldn't satisfy others. And I particularly welcome the provision of the 50% provision of social housing. 50% might be difficult to achieve, but on the other hand, we have to be aspirational. We have to set the bar at a high level because we are lacking in social housing within the authority. And certainly those targets have to be set. Private house builders, they're not there to really provide service. They're there, as profit-making organisations. But really, we have to hold them to those contracts to provide as much social housing as possible. And that is very important. I would assume in all parts of the county. It's certainly important in Abergavenny, where I have my ward. I think as well we have a responsibility to younger people to bring in a better mix of housing. If you're on a modest salary, then you cannot afford to buy a 4-bedroom house in Abergavenny or in Sevenside. You might possibly be able to achieve, to be able to buy something which is smaller, terraced, single-person accommodation, and that is important. It's certainly, you know, looking around the room, myself included, yes, probably we're all in a position where we live in houses that we bought years ago, and that's fine. But we have to think of younger people, and also as well older people who are downsizing. So I very much welcome that. We need to have a basis for getting people onto the housing ladder, and certainly, I think we need to look to growth. We can't be Luddite in this LDP. Growth is important. It's important for us all. We don't want to be an aged county, which to a certain degree we are. And last time I looked, the average age in Monmouthshire was something like 48, whereas if you look to somewhere like Cardiff, it's 34. And as people get older, people become less economically productive. And we need to have a mix of people right across that age spectrum. And finally, I think we're between a rock and a hard place. And I come from a farming background to a large extent. The issue of taking up a farmland, yes, I don't particularly want to say, yes, just take up acres and acres of prime agricultural land, but we live in a county where there are very few greenfield sites. If you go to RTC, go to Caerphilly, they've got numerous brownfield sites that they can develop for housing. We just haven't got them. And I do think we need to think carefully there. It is a difficult decision to take up agricultural land, particularly if it's good. But also as well, I think we need to hold farmers to account when we talk about phosphates. If you look at the development of the huge poultry farms in Monmouthshire, Powys, they are a major contributor to the phosphates issue in the Esk and the Wye. I think of a farm up from me with 250,000 poultry broiler chickens. 8 of those produce the same phosphates as one person. So that's probably about 30,000 equivalent people in huge sheds. So I think we've got to be have an ambition, and I do think, yes, we have to think carefully, and I take Councillor John Crook's points and the members of the public today, and not to be indiscriminate in terms of development, but we do have to develop. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Officers, I think that was more a statement than question. So now I'll go to Councillor Taylor, and then I'll go to Councillor Brown, and then I will come in. And then I'll let Councillor Howarth come in as well. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. So I've got a couple of questions, and I have to start really with Mark's statement that all the development in Mega with Dundee has actually opened up land to the public. In fact, I'd really love to know where that is. And I'm not just being glib there, but I really genuinely would love to know where that is, because indeed I think one of the residents was saying that, you know, some of the land, for example, the Dancing Hill site, it's used daily for dog walkers, as is a part of the candidate site, which is identified as being the Greenmore Lane site or whatever it is. But I think I just want to start with, I mean, you know, you said that only 3% of the county is actually developed, not in Mega with Dundee, not in Sevenside generally. And I think that that's slightly misleading in terms of referring to the whole of Monmouthshire. I think it would be helpful to understand what proportion of those parts of the county are indeed developed. I wonder if you would mind putting that map back up. I'm not going to talk just about Mega with Dundee, but I will make some references to it. I also heard officers talking about the matter of balance, and that, you know, every site is a compromise, except it feels to me, having become a councillor at the end, towards the end of the last planning process, that there are too many compromises, way too many compromises. And it doesn't feel like there's any balance in this plan at all. So, for example, Where is the consistency? You know, in the last plan period, we were told that Caldecott is not a sustainable settlement in any way, shape or form. I'd like to know what's changed. I'm sure you'll give me some, you know, answer which revolves around the sustainability backing up documents, but actually they haven't changed. Caldecott hasn't changed since the last plan. What's changed? Well, I tell you what's changed is policy has changed. Last time, the Welsh Government weren't satisfied with the number of houses that we had, and they added more. And you'll see that many of those housing sites haven't been brought forward at all in the plan period. You know this, you're the people who receive the applications. So how can we have any more confidence in this plan, I suppose, because I don't feel it or see it. The previous plan period, for example, we were also advised that, you know, Sevenside, again, would take a significant proportion, in fact, the lion's share, I think, of the development. Yet again, you refer to, for example, the sustainable settlements, and then including Sevenside in small brackets. However, for example, Caldecott East is not Caldecott East, right? It's Portskewett. It's not Caldecott at all. It's not within the Caldecott development boundary at all. Those two strategic sites that it would be really helpful if you could put them up, you know, the one council owned and the one not council owned, the one private in Mega with ND. Would you be able to put that map back up, Robert, just for clarity? If we look at those sites, I'll come back to that in a minute when you've put that up. But in general, one of my, you know, so a comment and question, the preferred strategy says Monmouthshire occupies a strategic location at the gateway to Wales, easily accessible by rail, road and all major centres in South Wales. This is not entirely the case though, is it? Really, because Monmouthshire is not well served by public transport. I think, you know, I associate myself with the comments of all of the committee that have spoken in respect of the deficit in public transport infrastructure. So whilst I acknowledge that there have been improvements in Caldecott and Chepstow in terms of the services, it's still not good enough, is it? And also, for example, if you catch a train from Caldecott, which you can now, you know, previously there were hardly any trains that ever stopped there, how much will it cost you? Anybody know? To Cardiff? Okay, so it'll cost you £11.60. If you catch a train from Aberdare to Cardiff, how much will that cost you? It's a lot further, actually. £5.20. So how is that a fair situation for our residents? So where we're saying that we want to improve infrastructure and that this plan is simply a land allocation policy and it sits alongside other policies such as strategic transport policies or voluntary transport policies, as we are now being told we need to produce, it's not good enough, is it? Because you know, I didn't have any confidence in the last plan period about some of the improvements we were supposed to be being made. And in fact, our bus services are even less frequent now. So you get an hourly service, even in Mega and Undy. So, you know, Mega with Undy is often described as a really strategic place. Well, it is if you've got a car, or if you want to use a car. Well, that is if you can use any of the roads which are so gridlocked because the Severn Bridge is shut because of high wind or whatever. But if you are not, if you don't have access to a car, and we've had a number of references to our ageing population, and not to say that, you know, those people can't or don't drive, however, it is a factor, you know, places being easily accessible is really important for a whole number of demographics, including older people often. So what are we doing to, you know, make these kind of communities integrated and accessible? Because even you know, we've talked about active travel. We still haven't got a route between Mega with Undy and Rogate. I know that we're making some progress and there are plans being developed, but it's still not there, is it? And that has been talked about since the second Severn crossing. And that is what? I don't know, everything seems 20 years ago, but I think that's more like going on for 35 years ago. And actually, we've not made that much progress on it. I've seen, 10 years ago, there was an alignment, there was land debated and discussed, there was a cost, there were bids made. We still haven't got it. So my question is, how can we have confidence as elected members? I associate equally myself with the comments of my colleague, Councillor Bryn, talking about her concern about the narrow focus of our affordable housing policy and also the concerns around land take from agricultural uses. It doesn't seem to be consistent. So we can say things in this document, but they seem to me to be warm words. And I certainly don't have confidence that they can be delivered. I would also suggest that the RLDP does nothing. It would talk about wanting to change the demographic profile. What are we going to do with all of the older people that we have living in Monmouthshire then? How does this RLDP lead to improvements in quality of life for those people? I mean, surely we're, going to want it to be a good place to live for everybody. And I don't buy the business of encouraging the promotion of sustainable communities where residents can live, work in the same area. Let's take our strategic economic sites. Let's take that one up there. We still haven't had any takers for the economic part of the land, because some of that land clearly was allocated for residential development, and that land was allocated in 2014, so it's nearly 10 years now, isn't it? And I know that we're talking about, well, there have been changes in working practices and changes in economic practices, but there weren't so much 10 years ago, were they, prior to COVID, but that still hasn't been developed. And my concern is that we'll end up allocating land for economic development and then we won't necessarily get any takers and it'll be further residential development. So I just want to hear some reassurance around some of those points. The final thing, and I think you can sort of see it on this map really, is I don't understand the reference to, oh, well, by building on this land, people want open space. It's really important. I was really disappointed, like Councillor Brown, to see the comment that came back in the letter around why we should focus the development on Sevenside, because then we protect some of our really important environmental assets. I don't know, and I don't want to seem glib about this, but the Gwent levels, again, I express my disappointment. We've all heard the references from Welsh Government about needing to provide supplementary planning guidance for the levels. We don't have that supplementary planning guidance. We are inundated and bombarded with developments for wind farms, solar farms, and further residential development, like on Glanllean, like, here, like in Caldecott. I don't understand why we're affording, what is it? It's a bit like animal, some places are more important than others. Some landscapes have more value than others. We're not really, what are we doing in this plan to protect the integrity of the levels? Because that landscape has been so degraded, we do nothing at all. And I've seen nothing in this plan that addresses that at all. And with Welsh Government not having brought forward that supplementary guidance, how are we going to address that? Because if you look at our designated amenity space, which is in exceptionally short supply, and I'm glad that that the officers acknowledge that, it's actually been shrink-wrapped or shrunk to fit the safeguarding routes for the M4 that's no longer going ahead. So my question also is, can we now expand that? Because we don't have the M4, we're not going to have a bypass, so we don't need those designated amenity spaces shrunk to fit. Because if you check out the map, if you have a look and you bring it up, you can see that the amenity land doesn't go all the way to the edge of the settlement, of the boundary, or not of the development boundary, sorry, but of the up until the buffer with the M4, because we've shrunk it in case the M4 went ahead. Well, it's not going ahead, is it? So can we have the designated amenity space back? And please, can we not, can we make a recommendation that it shouldn't be taken out? It's really important land. It's important not just in terms of visual amenity, residential amenity, but it's vital in terms of mitigating flood risk and mitigating the impact on the levels. We suffered significant flooding in 2020 in Mega with Undy, appreciating many other places have had much worse flooding and much more frequently. However, it's really important that we don't have a repeat of that. Although people perhaps don't understand that Millreen is a main river and has a significant floodplain. So I'd really like to understand how this plan addresses those factors and matters. And I'd like to ask, in the Chair's summing up, whether the Chair will concede to making a number of the points that have been made around concerns around spatial strategy, concerns around overdevelopment, particularly in Sevenside, concerns around the loss of amenity space, concerns around the way in which affordable housing perhaps is being viewed, and also critically that this plan just is not consistent with the climate emergency declared by this council and as climate and nature emergency declared by this council. And that I would be my ask. Thank you, Chair.
Craig, do you want to come in now?
Yeah, Chair, happy to come in there. There was a lot there from Councillor Taylor. So I'll try and get them through it and surely to jump in if I've missed anything as we're going through. In terms of Caldecott and the sustainability of Caldecott, yes, you've kind of answered the own question really, because there is a policy shift here. We have had direction from Welsh Government in relation to where development should be allocated within Monmouthshire, and it is to be focused on primary settlements, areas which do have access to railway links to bus services. And I know there's concerns there from members with regards to the infrastructure not being the standard at the moment, and that has to be looked at. And what I'm saying is that that is the direction of Welsh Government in terms of reducing travel movements. If we were to allocate lands isolated in a rural area or new settlements, the Welsh Government already indicated that that wouldn't be suitable. That's not the objective of Welsh Government, to ensure that we have reduction in terms of carbon footprint, is to reduce movement in the first place. So it is about connecting to an existing infrastructure and enhancing and upgrading to ensure that these the people living in these homes reduce their travel movement. So Caldecott has been brought into the mix. It is scoring well in terms of sustainability when looked at the whole in terms of Sevenside. And I appreciate you have a different view to that, but that has been done, that assessment work has been done, and it is, Caldecott Town Centre, if you walk down there, it is in need of that enhancement, of that growth of people to use it. And I think having that level of growth in Caldecott East will help sustain that community in the long term, and that's something that certainly needs to be looked at. In terms of the other comments with regards to Mega and Undy, I would suggest that at this stage we are looking at the preferred strategy. We aren't looking at individual land allocations. So that will all certainly be up for discussion as part of the deposit plan. As we've said today as officers, and Councillor Griffiths has said in terms of cabinet member for planning and the environment, for economy, he has stated that this will all be looked at in the realm. We are listening to Mega and Undy residents in terms of the development that has taken part in terms of the local development plan, and that will be reflected in terms of the deposit plan. So we will look at that in terms of which are the most appropriate sites to build on, and we can certainly have that discussion when the deposit plan is released and those kinds of sites come forward. Other comments with regards to the Gwent levels, again, completely agree with you that we need to ensure that we protect the Gwent levels. Welsh Government are working on supplementary planning guidance for it. I would suggest that this plan that we've been looking at today is incorrect, because the Gwent levels is further on down. It doesn't include Mega and Undy, so some of the area on the top would be potential for development proposals, but certainly the Gwent levels does need that additional protection. We can look at that as part of the deposit plan to see if a policy is needed. Hopefully the supplementary planning guidance would have more weight then, and we'll have more protection for the Gwent levels and moving forward. In terms of flooding, we certainly won't be building on any floodplain, so any land which is allocated for flooding we will not be proposing to build any houses on. So just to make that clear for all members, that certainly wouldn't be part of any proposal for a candidate site moving forward. There's two amenity lands, and looking at stretching it to the boundary. There will be a amenity land review, so planning policy officers will be going out and looking at all the amenity land, reviewing its value and if it can be extended or not. And again, those amenity land will be allocated in the deposit plan for consideration and for engagement. So we can certainly have those conversations with you, Francis Taylor, about what land you think should be as part of amenity land, and we can consider all of that as well as any other amenity lands across the county. The housing mix and affordable housing, again, we are working very, very closely with housing colleagues and with social housing landlords, Monmouthshire Housing Association, Mellon, to look at these sites and to ensure that we do provide a range of properties for people on the waiting list. So as I discussed earlier, in terms of the housing mix, we're looking at terrace properties, we're looking at bungalows, we're looking at semi-detached properties, we're looking at intermediate rent, we're looking at if people can do shared equity and low-cost ownership. So we are looking at all these different options, looking at the funding models for them. And there is, again, affordable housing workshop set in for members in November, I believe, and where we can discuss all of those options and see what members want to do in terms of that policy formulation moving forward. But that is all being looked at this time. And again, we want to ensure that we meet the need. So there is a need. The local housing market assessment has identified the housing need, and we will be looking to match that up with the houses that we develop. In terms of the metro, I think some of that lies outside in terms of the cost of ticket pricing and how that operates. It does lie outside of our, in terms of this, our land allocation, but certainly I think as a council together, we need to have those conversations about how we can look at reduced funding and look at different price points for that and enable people to use public transport. I agree with you, we need to ensure that people do that. I don't necessarily think it goes against the climate and nature emergency. I do see sustainability as all parts, so we need to look at, providing homes for people as well, providing jobs for people, providing services for people, and balancing that out against the nature and climate emergency and ensure these homes have the least impact on the environment as possible. And that's why we need to ensure they have those highest energy efficiency credentials as possible. So there's a lot of work to do around that policy to date, but I don't think not allowing growth or not providing those homes is the right answer to that. I think we need to balance this out and ensure that the climate and nature emergency is balanced out against the need for housing and for jobs. So I think there's a lot of work to do there in terms of ensuring that we can, as a council, work together to ensure that we create those sustainable communities as we move forward. I'm not sure whether there's anything else that I haven't missed. Mark, was there any further points there? I think so. Councillor Taylor, I'm not sure if you wanted to ask any supplementary questions.
Just that really, what you're saying is, well, we're going to have this growth. I mean, you talk about a land allocation policy, but I think it's really important to understand once that land is allocated, there is a presumption that any application coming in for that land use, it would be highly unusual for it not to be granted. So this is really important in respect of those things. And, one appreciates the council doesn't have control over the ticketing price. However, these are factors that are really important. If you're saying we have public transport, we don't. Despite 11 years of very hard work on Mega Station, it hasn't been brought forward yet. We know that we've moved forward, but it's not there yet. And until it is, we have to be realistic. If 11 years ago you'd have asked, then it's so obvious it would already be done. But the obvious things are not always those that are done. And I still come back to, it's all very well to have, to take it from those movable, shifting policy perspectives. But people don't live in a policy perspective environment. They live in the real world. They know what pieces of land they use. They know what impact this has. They know what adds to their quality of life, and they know what doesn't. And just because it says it, I'm not suggesting there should be no growth. What I am saying is there is an overburden of growth, and there is an under-recognition in all of this of both the climate emergency and the infrastructure. And that means that this plan cannot be sound at present. It cannot be sound because there is, I've looked through, there's 196 times that climate is mentioned, mainly saying that the houses that will be built will be carbon net, whatever the term is. Well, that is not enough, and that is not what we're looking for. That's my point. That's the point I'm trying to make. It doesn't tell me anything in here about what we're going to do to mitigate against the matters we've talked about. I mean, it's basically like, is it going to flood? Can it be built? Okay, well then, you know, that could potentially go in. It's a very low bar, and I'm afraid it's just not good enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Taylor. I can assure you the bar is very, very high for any development proposal in Wales in terms of the legislation, the habitats regulations assessment, the integrated sustainability appraisal, the economic development strategy, the local transport plan. This isn't done in isolation. There's a lot of work which is going to be needed to ensure and evidence to Welsh Government that this development can happen. And I can assure you that that is going to be done not just by examined by this council, it's going to be examined by an independent planning inspector who will then look at whether it's sound or not. So I appreciate that it might be a view that this plan isn't sound, but all of those environmental credentials will be looked at and weighed up against national, local planning policy and consider whether it's set. I appreciate you might not necessarily agree with some of the national planning policy, but that is going to be done, and there will be a weigh-in as to whether this plan is sound or not. So I think at this stage, Welsh Government have indicated the level of growth is completely sustainable, it's appropriate for Monmouthshire, it's delivering in terms of those affordable housing, and as we develop the deposit plan now with full member engagement to ensure that these policies are going to be fit for purpose and do provide those sustainable communities which I think we all want to create, then, you know, with that test of soundness will certainly be there in terms of that examination process.
Just say one final thing, and I do apologise for taking up your time. I, unlike anybody else sitting in this room, sat through the last examination of the plan, and can I tell you, did I have confidence then that what the inspectors had was in the best interest in Monmouthshire? No, I didn't. Do I now? No. Has that been sustainable development? I don't believe so. So I appreciate what you say, and you say it, you know, from a position where you're a planner and you're adhering to policy, and I understand that. But can I just say, the policy is not always right. Neither is necessarily the implementation of the policy. And then finally, if we don't get all the things that need to happen to make the policy work, then effectively it isn't sound. And that's the concern I have. So I sat there. It was very painful. And that's all I'll say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. We're going to take a short break because we've been going now for some time, and then we'll reconvene, and it's Councillor Brown wants to come in. Obviously, I want to come in. I have comments from Councillor Keir, and I understand Councillor Howarth also wishes to participate, and then hopefully we'll be finished, okay? Thank you. You've all been wonderful. Okay, Councillor Brown, I understand you wanted to quickly come in there.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Chair, I was looking at the recommendations at 2.1 and it says the Place Scrutiny Committee scrutinises proposed post-consultation amendments to the Replacement Local Development Plan Preferred Strategy prior to it being reported to Council on the 26th of October to seek endorsement of the amendments as the basis for preparing the deposit plan. I think that we should take out the last bit and actually say that we can't endorse this because it doesn't include the infrastructure improvements that are needed. That's road, transport and green infrastructure, and also that we can't agree the change of the Bayfield site to Mountain Road. Bayfield and Mountain Road site, they'll both cause mayhem at the High Beach roundabout, but the Mountain Road site even more because it's directly next to it. So those are the amendments that I was hoping that the committee would endorse, because, you know, we've got to be careful because this is a recommendation. And I think it needs, from the discussion we've had, I think it needs to be amended because we can't look at this in isolation, you know, unless we know that we're going to have improvements to High Beach Roundabout, M48 links, bypasses, and all the other infrastructure issues, including green infrastructure that's been mentioned as well, then, and doctors and everything else that public transport and everything else that the public needs to make this plan workable, we can't really endorse it. Thank you.
Put that amendment into the chat bar so we can have a look at it, so I can speak to what members' views are. Whilst you're doing that, Councillor Brown, I've had a submission from Councillor Keir, who is an Councillor Brown, if you can put that amendment into the chat bar just so all the members of the committee can have a look at it. Okay. Whilst you're doing that, I've had a contribution from Councillor Tony Keir, who's an County Councillor. I'm going to read it as it states. Of the 5 sites, I had understood the Glanaravan site was not moving forward. Please can confirmation be given regarding this? With regard to the other 4 sites, I have looked into the detail of the consultation comments and would confirm, in my opinion, they accurately reflect local views made to me via face-to-face and online meetings and the Civic Society. He declares an interest as he chairs this group. I won't repeat those well thought out objection comments here, rather summarise that I have not seen any mitigating supporting comments to persuade me to change my original view that I will not be supporting the inclusion of any of these sites into the RLDP. I don't know if officers want to comment back on Councillor Keir's remarks for the record.
Only briefly, Chair, to say we're not considering candidate sites today, so that isn't part of the report or the recommendation to Scrutiny Committee. Would be part of the next report to Council. That'll be deposit plan stuff for next time.
Lovely. And then if I can just contribute to this as the Portskewer ward member, I understand the need for affordable housing is immense. The lasting impact it can have on homeowners and their families is undeniable, but it should not be at the detriment of existing residents. There needs to be a balance met rather than saturating gridlock areas. I've got concerns around the infrastructure. I think, like all members have spoken well today and raised. We need it to support the growth in existing residents. I've got huge concerns around flooding. I know you say you're not going to build on a floodplain. I have photographic evidence that the David Broom Event Centre has flooded. Where the show jumping arenas are, maybe not, but the area at the back. So I would welcome a meeting with officers on site to walk around and we can work out the photographs that I have been provided by members of the public to ensure that you are not going to build on on that section of land should the Crick Road development go ahead. Obviously, we've had flooding in Caldicot. You've got Castle Lee, part of the industrial estate. I actually worked for a business where it flooded up to the desks. Like Councillor Taylor said, transport links. What transport links? There's reduced bus services in the area. It's been impossible these last few weeks for some of my residents to get a bus from Portstewart due to one road being closed. We talk about Mega Station, which has been in the pipeline for a long time. I'm sure Councillor Crook can also echo mine and Councillor Taylor's concerns. I did have a conversation with our public transport planning manager with regards to a railway station for Portstewart. You know, we've seen vast development over the last few years. If we're going to see more, we need somehow for these people to get to their places of work. I don't think we're going to have people being able to move into the area who are going to be necessarily working within the community. Desired jobs are usually outside the area, and we do need to accept that. We can put some businesses and employment opportunity, but I'm also concerned for the future of Wales, attracting businesses we've seen in national press recently. I also want confirmation that you've taken into consideration the gypsy and traveller sites that have been proposed this week by the Council's administration, one in Crick in Portstewart Ward and one on the B4245 Portstewart Ward behind Parkwall Roundabout. I already have a gypsy and traveller lifetime site, a registered, authorised gypsy and traveller site. You know, we need to take into consideration how these people will interact with one another and also the wider community. Amenity space, Portstewart's very similar to Mega and Undy. We're alongside the river. We are running out of space. I am very grateful that I still have a lot of green open space, but if we go ahead with the Crick Road development and the plans in the RLDP, we're going to be in exactly the same position as Mega and Undy residents find themselves in at this moment in time. I'm also concerned about the road infrastructure. The A48 junction for Crick Road is a pinch point. If you have a vehicle from 7.5 tonne upwards, you cannot get another vehicle past it. This is a concern of mine, especially with the thought of 850 houses. That means they're all going to be coming on to the B4245. There is already high volumes of traffic and build up, and then where are they going to go? They're either going to go to Mega or they're going to have to go to Chepstow. Both those areas are a bottleneck at present. I will touch on education because Councillor Strong brought it up. ARW is oversubscribed. It's one classroom that has provision. But obviously I'm concerned with where children within these families are going to go. I echo Councillor Brown and Councillor Strong's concern with regards to that area becoming gridlock, like I said. The location, wait there a moment, just checking my notes. We said about the ageing population, we've got a huge problem with lack of burial sites in the area. I know my community council have put forward a site, potential site for burial, which I don't think it's one that the council wish to proceed, but where are we going to bury people? That is a huge concern among our ageing population, so that also needs to be considered. And, you know, we can talk about Caldicot Town Centre being a sustainable development. We really need to push and make improvements to Caldicot Town Centre. If you're going to have 850 houses coming to the area, where are these people going to shop? Where are they going to be going? They're going to be getting in their cars and travelling to Newport, Bristol or Cardiff. So I've got huge concerns with regards to this LDP, and I echo what Councillor Taylor said at the end. Thank you. Do you want to come in there?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Well, disappointing to hear that you and Councillor Taylor have got such concerns. There's clearly some really big solutions that we need to find as a council to those pressing needs around affordable housing, demographic balance, and that. So, yeah, we'll have to keep working on that with you to get an LDP that works. In terms of, I think a lot of those points were covered already in terms of that infrastructure piece. You explicitly asked if we've taken into account the Gypsy Traveller potential sites that's subject to a report for next week for consultation. That isn't part of the strategy. That'll be a deposit plan consideration. So yeah, that's a separate issue for now. That paper is to consider consultation on those sites, and then following that consultation, there'll be a future report to decide which sites should go into the deposit LDP. So that's one for the future. Burial sites, again, that kind of stuff will be in the deposit plan. Completely agree. Caldecott Town Centre needs that regeneration. Potentially this growth could help support the town. It's very much lacking in traditional retail destinations at the moment, and that's a struggle for all of our towns in terms of things like internet shopping as well. But that extra growth could help with the town centre's regeneration and support those amenities that are there and help them to grow and the town centre to change in the way that high streets are changing going forwards. But note those points. Thanks, Councillor.
Thank you, Mark.
Sorry, Chair.
Go on.
You did also ask about a site visit regarding flooding. Yes. Yeah, very happy to do that with you. That'd be helpful. Thanks.
I'd really appreciate that. Obviously, with regards to the Gypsy and Traveller sites that are currently in my ward, obviously this site will wrap around that site, I believe.
Chair, I think we need to be really careful about talking where minority people live. I think we might be at risk of disclosing too much information publicly.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Howarth, would you like to come in here?
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. As a member which resides on the other side of the county, on the north side, everything revolving around my LDP comes from the national parks, so I actually have no issues with the LDP within Monmouthshire, but I do have a corporate responsibility. People were looking for support for me and others to endorse the LDP or the revised LDP. I was part of the process in 2012, which sat in Caldecott Leisure Centre till about 2 o'clock in the morning. Some members, you may be in for a long day or night, because that's how long it took to agree the old LDP. I think Councillor Taylor is the only member part of that which has been present today, but there will be members looking on, looking in the future how we actually how we endorse it and how we get to the recommendations in the end. But I must say, it let us down really badly because we haven't delivered on what we put and what we struggled and fought for. And I think members today have really spoke on what their aspirations are and what we want out of it, which is really important. We did that in 2012, and I'm going to touch on one of the main things that we touched on in 2012, which we have not delivered on. And we've talked about it this morning, and we're going to talk about it probably forever, is the affordable housing aspect of all this. I remember some months ago, it's some time ago now, this council actually endorsed and taking on its own company, probably to deliver housing, and a part of that was affordable housing on our land, and I think something that we should still explore and still go forward with. And I'll just give you a couple of things there. Exception sites, we've talked about greenbelt land here today, and actually stepping into the greenbelt land to deliver. Is it possible? Is it not possible? Exception sites are there. If everybody doesn't know what an exception site is, please look at what an exception site is. It's something that somebody can do or apply for to build affordable homes. We have a very good site in Goitra, which is virtually in between Pontypool, if you don't know where it is. And it's some years ago now, but actually that had an extension through Monmouthshire to extend that site to deliver affordable homes, and it was an exception site. There is possibilities that we as a council could urge our associations, our 3 that we work with, to actually probably look at that, because I'd hate to give away valuable brownfield sites to associations, which we have done. I called a site in here early on in council, which is the one in Caldicott, which was a brownfield site. It was a brownfield site, guys. There are sites out there which they can actually look at, and that applies to Abergavenny, and that applies to places like Tudor Street. They are valuable brownfield sites. Our associations can use exception sites also. We can't, but they can. But we can work with them to deliver. And I think that is one of the avenues we should explore. I was totally disappointed in 2012 about the numbers games we used on the key sites, our key development sites. I was totally opposed to it, and many members were, but we went along with it because we felt that it was not deliverable. We could not deliver affordable homes on them numbers that they'd given on percentages. And the reason why that was is because exactly what we've talked about today now, at the end of the day, there's one pot of money that a developer will have. It was said today about an issue that we couldn't come to some agreement with developers on delivering the amount of affordable homes within some of them projects. I can remember very clear, because I had the conversations with a senior officer here, and it was a real senior officer here, about a toolkit we used to use to take forward on the cost equivalence of what a site would cost to deliver. I don't know where that toolkit went, because I sat in many planning applications and rejected some planning applications on the amount of affordable housing we were delivering. And every member, whatever party you were, whether you were red, blue, black, whatever, green, whatever, you'd let the planning applications go through. I was furious. I actually stood down from planning committee because of what was happening in Amfoist, because we weren't sticking to our guns on the 20 and 30% policy. I wanted more then, but I'm realising now that actually if we go for more, we're going to lose out on the sums that we'll be looking for to deliver education, to deliver infrastructure, to deliver doctor surgeries. There has to be a balance here, because if we don't have that balance, members, we'll get nothing, because developers won't build. It may be, members, that's what they want. So be it. But if we do not get that balance right, we will not get development, and we need some growth in Monmouthshire. I think in 2012 we looked at bungalows. We are an ageing population. It's been said today, will be said all the time. We are an ageing population, we're an ageing county. We will free up, if we can deliver what people want, we will free up properties also for people to actually purchase. So if there's a development comes along, I know we've allowed some of these developments. I'm trying to think of some of the companies now which build complexes where you can actually move in there and all singing and dancing and have everything. But what's happening is we're having a lot of people from outside the area coming to the county, which is great because they do bring wealth with them as well. But what they do is take away the properties that actually we do need to reside for people in Monmouthshire. Another example was mentioned today about the MOD. I was quite interested in that comment. I have the MOD sitting in Crickhowell Camp, virtually not far from where I live. The problem we have with the MOD is a lot of their officers and senior people take a lot of rented properties. I know in Abergavenny there's a lot of properties taken over by the MOD. They rent them off private landlords, off agents. So we have to be really careful what we do with that one as well. And I do believe, I think that is probably one of the conversations we need to have on development and what we do with the MOD. It is important. It's important to have them here. They do bring a lot of things to the county as reference to viability, and they are people who actually integrate as well, and families also. I think that's most of what I wanted to say here. But I am really disappointed. I've been watching the affordable housing side for many years now within the authority and asking lots of questions. I'm really disappointed we have not delivered, because it is going to come back and fall on us. I'm not going to agree to the 50% now, because I don't think that is going to be achievable with the landscapes for the next decade. I cannot agree with that. I would agree with it 12 years ago. I'm not going to agree with it now, Chair, because I don't think it is deliverable on the key sites. We even went to 40% on the outsides in the rural areas, 40%. We didn't achieve anything, very little. So we need to get that right. And I honestly, I believe we can get it right, but there are the tools that we need to put in place to deliver that. And I don't know whether we've got them tools at the moment, but I look forward to your meeting or your seminar on affordable homes in November, you said. I think that'd be really important for members to come to. So really, I haven't got many questions there. The toolkit's one. Have we been using it, and why aren't we using it? Is it not fit for purpose, perhaps? Have we got a new toolkit? Is a consultant the answer to that, an outside consultant to deliver affordable homes? If he comes from a large city, let's say, or he's got a city background, he's going to use his toolkit. We're a rural county. Very difficult to deliver affordable homes in a rural county. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harriff. Just for my notes, were they exemption sites that you were exception? Sorry. Officers, would you like to come back in there?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Howarth. I agree with some of the challenges that you're certainly saying around affordable housing. There's certainly a lot of work we still need to do with housing officers and colleagues. If I start off with the toolkit, yeah, that was the Free Dragon toolkit was an old toolkit which has been replaced now with this new viability assessment which the consultants have been working on across South East Wales. So South East Wales as a group has actually looked at this, and South West Wales is also using it. So it is something that is going to be looked at to be national in terms of this person who we're using. So we're trying to get that consistent approach, trying to ensure that viability is looked across the board, and not looking at rural against urban areas, but also looking against rural. So other councils as well. So we've been working with Vale Glamorgan, for instance, we've got similarities there in terms of our demographic and in terms of the sites. So really trying to get that consistent approach and using that one viability assessor to ensure that we can have that consistency moving forward. So that is being done. Again, we are going to have a session with him coming as well and talking to members to explain that process a bit more. So that would be really, really useful alongside the affordable housing workshop that we're going to do. In terms of the delivery of affordable housing, I think some of that has stifled it in recent years. In terms of the 15 sites that went forward, 8 of them have been delivered in rural areas. So it's, the 60% affordable housing schemes in rural areas, I think you were referring to, there were 60% affordable housing, 40% private, and they have been delivered, 8 of them. Some of them have been held up because of phosphates, unfortunately. One of them because of land ownership issues, but I think in the whole that some of that wouldn't be foreseen in 2012, 2014. In terms of the delivery we have done, I think that is really, really successful. Obviously with the water quality within the north of the county, that has hampered things quite significantly in terms of delivery of those sites. But there are certainly challenges around 50% in terms of viability, in terms of funding. I would refer back to my response to Councillor Brown earlier about the fact that we are doing all of this work up front now, whereas in 2012, 2014 we weren't doing that. It wasn't part of the manual, it wasn't part of the legislation. Now they have to submit viability assessments. They didn't have to previously. And the gift is going to be within the Council's planning committee moving forward in terms of having the sort of willingness and the sort of need to refuse those developments which don't hit that target. It is an aspirational target, but it will be outlined in planning policy, and hopefully whilst government will ensure that is sound in terms of the examination and stick by those decisions if they go to appeal, if this planning committee decides to refuse. So I think it is about having the conviction to ensure that we don't allow anything less than policy moving forward, and that is down to us as a council in our planning committee. In terms of the Ministry of Defence and those conversations, yes, it's something that I hadn't actually thought about in terms of those taking up renting properties in the local area. That is something that we'll have to look at. We can control all of those sort of private matters outside of a land allocation document like a replacement local government plan. But I think we can have those conversations with the Ministry of Defence as we move forward in terms of what their intentions are and the impact they'll have on that local area, and that's something that we need to continue to do. I take your point in regards to Section 106 contributions in affordable housing and the need for educational and recreational, and that, you know, all of that needs to be looked at in the realm in terms of sustainability. I do agree with you. All I would say is that we are trying to do that and front load that as part of the viability assessment, so those figures are all input in. As I outlined earlier, we've had the conversations about the Monmouth site and the local education authority. That will be done on every single site. They will be consulted. We will be looking at where there's capacity and front loading that as much as possible. So I think some of this is going to be in the detail in terms of that deposit plan, when we can share with you some of that more information really in terms of what are the sites, what are those contributions going to be, and how we are going to move forward with them. So this is very, very strategic, this document at the minute, in terms of the level of growth. I'm sorry to keep battering off to the deposit plan, but that deposit plan will have more detail for you all members as we move forward.
Thank you for that.
Sorry, Chair, just to mention one other thing in terms of the affordable housing exemptions policy. There might be more scope to allow more of that in the deposit plan as well moving forward. So at the moment, to focus on rural settlements, there might be more scope to open that up potentially to allow developments in other areas as well. So that's something that we are looking at, Councillor Howarth, as well.
Thank you all. Are there any more comments or questions for officers today? No? Okay. I'll quickly sum up. Can I just have a show of hands for those of you who are happy to endorse this report as per the recommendations? Okay. Okay, we've debated this and discussed it at length. I think there are some rather large concerns from members sat here today, and they're unhappy to proceed with endorsing this report. There are some concerns around infrastructure and the impact that's going to have on existing residents and new residents coming to the area, whether that be transport, education or health. There are some serious concerns around the saturation of smaller areas. So obviously we've got 850 houses being proposed for the south of the county. There's around about 607 houses being proposed to the north. Considering we're such a large county, I do feel it could be spread out more evenly. Members would also like to see a more not so car dependent strategy. They want the road network to be improved but not be relied upon so heavily. At this moment in time, the proposals, those residents will have to rely on car transport. There are some concerns around the MOD and what that means for local residents. I think Councillor Howarth also said that we need to be a bit more creative. We need to look at exception plans, which will work with affordable housing organisations. Members felt we need to protect agricultural land. The proposals will impact transport infrastructure, health and education and the capacity there. We want to look at if there's any more brownfield sites available across the county. Are we sure that we've exhausted everything across Monmouthshire? A member also raised what modelling had been undertaken to look at traffic volumes increasing around certain areas. And also the lack of active travel that around the south of the county was also a concern. So I think it's fair to say that there's a lack of confidence in this plan from some members. So I think we're not able to endorse this today, unfortunately, is how we feel. Is everyone happy? Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I think, you know, some of the comments I'd made about, you know, concern about the amendment of Bayfield to Mountain Road. I mean, both will cause mayhem at the High Beach roundabout, but even more so for Mountain Road site because it's directly next to the roundabout, and land at Mountain Road site is needed for High Beach roundabout improvements.
Okay.
Thank you.
There is also a comment that this does not align with the Council's climate emergency. Okay, members, thank you very much. We've now got the forward work plan, and I think, Rob, you wanted to present that.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of comments, just to draw your attention to a few things, really. So, obviously, we had those couple of workshop dates that shifted, but just to clarify that the one on the 10th of October is going ahead, as it says on here, so just to clarify that. Then, just to note, it had come up previously from some members about the electric vehicle charging strategy. That's been added into the special that we've called for January, in which we'll be looking at the climate and nature emergency strategy, as that has changed and is now something new. So those two go very well together. So just to let you know that that has been added in if you haven't spotted it, as that had come up previously. And there's one on here about school meals procurement, which is, as it says, it's about questions around whether that, to what degree procurement is leading to deforestation. That's something that's been raised by one of the councillors, and so it's included here. You know, if you're happy for that to be considered, there's Osbaston Primary School are involved with this, and they're going to be involved more with the with fair trade events that are happening this autumn. So it's something that's very much coming up and is going to feature reasonably heavily in things. So it's where, if you're happy to consider that, then it's currently on there for. Well, it might be March, but it's on there right now as December, but it might move around. But it's just to draw your attention to those things.
Okay, and item 6, the Cabinet and Council Work Planner. Obviously, if there's anything that you want to be added to this committee, please let me know. But it's just to note, really. And to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting, can I have a proposer and a seconder for those minutes? Are you happy? Jackie, can I take you as a proposer? Councillor Brown, can I take you as a seconder for that? Lovely. And the next meeting is Thursday, the 9th of November at 10 a.m. Thank you, everyone. It's been a really long meeting. You've all done incredibly well.
Could you actually find somebody else to be a seconder? Because I gave apologies for that meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can we proceed? Emma, were you... Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay, lovely. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, officers.